Oh my God.
All right,
Okay, we should be ready to roll.
Yep. All right, good evening. This is the January 12th, 2026 special meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee Project Development Subcommittee. This is a hybrid meeting, so we have people on Zoom, including our consultants. And then we also have some people here in the room, and we also have a couple audience members, one audience member in particular, but another member of our committee that's here to listen. So let's go ahead, and the first item on the agenda is roll call and call to order. Bill Perrette.
Here.
Michael Sweeney.
Here.
Hillary Ormond.
Here.
Jane Williams.
Here.
Jeff Williams.
Here.
And I'm Krista Nielsen, and I'm here. Like I said, we also have Bob Strong, who's on the full committee with us here in the room, and we have Penny Young, who's on town council, sitting in our audience. And then on Zoom, we have Miles Brown and Jeremy, I'm not going to say your last name, with Menta Emma, and I'll turn it over to you guys in just a few minutes. But before we go to the big presentation tonight, I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking through how we as a committee want to involve the public in this conversation going forward, because I think we're getting pretty close to the point where we're going to want to get some public input on what we're doing here. Obviously, we'll make that final decision after we hear the presentation tonight, and there's obviously a chance that you guys say, oh, we're not ready for prime time yet. Let's go back to the drawing board a little bit. But on the assumption that we are ready for prime time at the end of this evening, did everyone take a look at what I sent out in the email?
Yeah.
All right, so we had 3 public meetings on there. One of them is sort of quasi-public at the library. The first one being this evening, where we're talking about this. This will be available on the town website. Anyone can go back and review this later if they weren't able to attend tonight. On January 26th, I've talked about this a few times, but myself, Sarah Carey, the town planner, and Scott Hobbs are doing a talk at the New Canaan Library. And the conversation will be about paths to affordable housing, comparing and contrasting what we've done with inclusionary zoning on Burtis Avenue and what the Housing Authority has done at Canaan Parish, which is 100% affordable. And then talk about the future, which is what we're doing here at Affordable Housing Committee. So that'll kind of be a soft launch of the public conversation about what we're doing. Again, if we decided then tonight that we're ready. And then ultimately, I was thinking we may want to have a dedicated meeting or opportunity for the public to come for us to present these options and take questions and answers or just public feedback on this. And I put a placeholder in there for the week of February 9th, which we can come back to in a minute. The second piece I put in here is to do some sort of online survey. I've talked a little bit with Tucker. The town does have a SurveyMonkey account. And so I've gone ahead and put together some preliminary ideas of how we could do a survey. I didn't have these options on hand when I threw some ideas together, but just a sort of a generic framework that we could plug in. And so if, again, we decide tonight we're ready to go, we could open that the same night as the library talk, so that I could end the library talk with and check out our survey and give us some feedback that way, or come to our public meeting on X date if you want to do that. We do have a couple of different ways to publicize that. When we did it for the POCD, there's a mailing list that Sarah has of people that were interested. I would advocate that we kind of piggyback on that and use that same email list. We could put it on our website. We could have flyers if anybody thinks that's important. And so I would think that we should keep that survey open for close to a month is my general thought, wrapping up after what's for me February break. I don't know if anyone else has that constraint in their life, but that's what's on my horizon. And then give ourselves a couple of weeks to go through those results and put together some sort of report on what we heard from the public on these options, so that we can both make decisions as a committee about how to move forward, and then also give feedback to Menta Emma about which preferred option we want them to refine further. We also also have the opportunity of doing a press release. And Tucker mentioned that Greg Riley, who works here at Town Hall, could help probably with that. We could get it. We could talk about where we want to get it, but the obvious choice is the First Selectman's newsletter that comes by email, but possibly in the newspapers if we felt that was good. So that's kind of what I had in mind. It's not a small amount of work. We have to commit ourselves that we're ready to go and that we're ready to do this. But I'm open to your thoughts on this whole idea.
Well, first, thank you for thinking through all of this. I have a question about the timing of the survey vis-a-vis the January 26th event and the just we'd be getting some input before, not the January 26th event, but before the February either 12 event and then some after. And I'm wondering about the wisdom of that, just in terms of how much information people will have before versus after. And
yeah, I mean, my experience is that you've got different people who you can reach through different mediums. And there are the people that will come out like Penny to a town meeting and sit in the audience and ask questions and get answers that way. There are people that are watching on Zoom. There are people that just want to kind of go straight to the meat of the point, which might be the survey without that. I've struggled, and to anybody who wants to help me with the survey, with creating a survey that provides enough context to how we got to this place that people don't immediately just say no, no, and no, like, I don't want to do this, without being so much information, because as we all know, this is technical, complicated stuff that people look at the first 27 paragraphs and say, no, I don't want to read all that. Like, that's way too much information. So I have some ideas about how we simplify it for those that choose to just do the survey route, so that at least they have some background material. But I think we should encourage everybody to come to a meeting.
Maybe this is not the question you want to have asked, but so what's our objective for the survey?
Well, so ultimately, my understanding, and you guys fill me in if you feel differently, is that our job here is to provide a recommendation to our elected officials about how we could obtain a 2032 moratorium. And so I think that it's good form for us to, during that process, get some public input so that when we go to elected officials and say, hey, we think option A is the best option, it's based on our professional expertise, it's based on the consultant's expertise, but it's also hopefully based on the feedback we get from the public. Now, I don't think we should put any options out there that we can't live with. So as we go through this tonight, there may be one that you're like, wow, that's not a realistic option. We should question whether we put that out there. But my hope is that we have at least 2 realistic options that we can put out there. And in giving a report back to elected officials, we can say that we got public feedback on it so that they're not feeling like now they've got to figure out where the public stands.
so prior to the February, sorry, did you want to follow up on it? Prior to the February meeting, people won't know about the 3 or 2 or whatever it ends up being options specifically, will they? They won't have seen any plans or.
Well, so the plans will be on the survey.
Oh, they will. Okay.
Yeah, so the survey will show each plan and ask a series of questions about what you like and what you don't like. And then ultimately do like a cross correlation, like, okay, you've seen both plans for Richmond Hill, you've seen both plans for Locust, you've seen both plans for Lumberyard. How would you then rank these?
Okay, got it.
In terms of priority.
I didn't realize that. That
And
makes some sense.
do we think we have to establish any context that's driven us to do this work and I mean, there's still a lot of people who don't think we have to do this, that this is an elective process.
Right.
I mean, just people like, so why'd you get involved? It's just an elective thing. I said, oh, wait a minute, guys, we have to do this. And I don't think that's generally well understood, that it's mandated by the state. We've gotten ourselves in a bit of a pickle already. How do you see us communicating that to
So that, like I was saying earlier, I think is the challenge of the survey vehicle, and that it doesn't give you a whole lot of room to explain yourself, which is why the public meeting does fill that gap. The one way that I came to, that I am not totally set on yet, but seems like the best option or a good option, is I plugged all of our meeting materials from the last 18 months into AI, into Notebook LM. And it spit out a 5-minute explainer video. It was actually surprisingly good, with a few really weak points that I haven't figured out how to fix, but 85% of it was like right on the point and answers all these questions you're asking, like who would live in affordable housing? Why is New Canaan having to do this? What is 830G? What is a moratorium? How many units do we need to get a moratorium? Sort of all these high level points, which, you know, is enough to be dangerous, not enough to understand it in detail. We've taken obviously a great amount of time as a committee to understand it in greater detail, but hopefully would at least provide some context, because like you're saying, without context, I think people will look at the survey and click through and be like, nope, 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 and nope.
I don't like affordable housing, so I'm saying
Yeah.
no about everything.
Yeah.
So as you're thinking about it, I recognize that you're kind of still in the preliminary stages of putting that together, but when would that be when would that be used as a communications device, and when would we be putting it in the hands of the town? Not the town body, but the town
public.
electorate, town citizens.
So, I mean, my thought was that we need some sort of preamble to the survey. So when you open the survey, you know, however you get it, whether it's a QR code, whether it's a link in an email, the first page is going to bring you to a page that tells you, you know, here's what the purpose of the survey is. Here's how long we expect it to take. Here's the topic. And then if you haven't been following our process for the last 18 months to 2 years, here's some resources that you can rely on, including potentially, if I can make it work better, an explainer video, you know, a link to 830G, you know, a whole, you know, our chart, our, what do you call it? What town council wrote that made affordable housing committee possible.
Yeah.
Charter.
Ordinance or
Our
charter.
ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that type of information that,
And the library presentation also.
yeah, we could do a link
Ultimately,
to.
or wherever we're having the February one. Not so much, I mean, the January one could be linked, but also.
Right. So people who
February
take
one
it
for
before the
people who take
February.
it after,
Right.
right?
I mean, the other thing is if you guys
Could
don't feel
wait.
comfortable, we could wait and not open the survey until after we have a public meeting exclusively on this topic. And then we just keep it open a little longer, because I don't really see us getting a public meeting in January. We don't have that much time left. I mean, a public meeting is, particularly on a topic like affordable housing, is not just a small undertaking. We really need to think through and be prepared, because
Right.
there's going to be, you know, a lot of opinions.
You know, I'm more experienced in this area than I am. And I guess, what's the objective for the meeting? So just so we can say we had one, we're really looking for input. Input from whom, the most informed, or the population, you know, at large. And I was wondering, them having done one of these before, you know, might we think something one a little bit later? Because a lot of people are away for the winter, you know.
Okay.
Yes, right. And might we try to reach out to a whole broader level of constituencies? So we get sort of a cross representation of the town if you want that. If we don't want that, then we can be narrower. Then you can say, well, how would you do that? Well, you know, you could do it randomly by tax ID number, you know, 12,000 different ways of doing it. So I just put those some of the questions, and I don't really have an answer, and I don't have a preference. A lot depends. I mean, I think for me, this is gonna, I think gonna be, wait till we see it, but I think it's gonna be a big change, right?
Mhm.
And so getting more, explaining more, I think would be better. That would be my sense. So
I-
therefore, it'd be more elaborate, and I do it in one change time.
Yes, I really think the only, well, there's a couple of time constraints to keep in mind in terms of how quickly or how slowly we go through this process. One is, I think I meant to Emma, you know, wanted to do this even quicker than we've outlined, and I've sort of told them that we could probably be to a preferred option by June. So that was part of my thought process, is in order to get to a preferred option by June, we've got to keep this process moving now. I'm sorry, what was the other question?
Well, it was-
Oh, the timelines. The other timeline is Miles and I have talked a little bit about it. But even though 2032 feels like a long way away, 6 years away, we really don't have too much time to lose at this point. I mean, in terms of getting the architectural design done, I mean, A, choosing a site, B, getting the full plans done, going through planning and zoning, getting the financing. I mean, it's a whole schedule that's pretty rigorous and will bring us pretty much up to 2029 or 2030 to start construction. And then you've got to hope that that all goes well and you've got the units leased up and, well, maybe not leased up, but certificates of occupancy by 2032 in order to maintain that rolling moratorium. So that's the other reason to kind of keep the pressure on to keep this process moving, because it feels like we have a lot of time. I suspect even after we do this process and make a recommendation to our elected officials, that there's going to be some time spent, and there should be on their part, figuring out how they want to proceed, because it's a huge cost to the town.
Well,
So-
not only that, I mean, it's not only a huge cost, it's town property, so there will have to be a public hearing in front of town council about the use of, because all three are town-owned properties. So there's going to be a number of steps after a number of sort of bureaucratic steps that once it leaves our, once we've made the recommendation. And I don't know if it's I guess we would present to the Board of Finance and to the Board of Selectmen and to town council.
Mhm.
But there'll be a number of steps in there too for the public to be engaged.
So maybe you're saying that our reach out to the public is a little bit more for us to formulate our opinion, get to some people missed.
Right,
But then the big stage, the big presentation goes to the town council.
right. Because remember, we're not making a
Yeah.
decision. We're just
That's
making a
fine.
recommendation. But I feel like we should be informed,
Yeah.
at least where the public stands.
And to Jeff's earlier point, January 26th is one opportunity, but the February meeting is really our first opportunity to put this out there, because even though we've mentioned it a bunch of times, but there aren't a whole lot of people paying attention yet, that will be the first time, I think.
Well, and this will get people's attention.
Yeah.
I promise you it will get their attention.
That's my biggest
Yeah.
concern. I think the way you laid this out, I think is perfect. I think you got the steps right. The only thing that was coming to mind was when I was reading through it is, do we need to elongate it a little bit? And I may be wrong about that, but you guys have touched on this already,
Yeah.
that if the library meeting sounds like it's more of a generic thing, to
It
talk
is.
generically about it. So it's not going to be any kind of reveal that night. So I don't know how well that'll be attended. I mean, I think we've seen over the past year or so, not a lot of interest, at our meetings. There's going to be a precipitating event. There's going to be some spark. It's probably going to be our first meeting. And what I don't want to have happen is for comments to be made unfairly that, where did this come from?
Yeah.
It's a fait accompli. This is already baked and now you're asking us about this. So I want to make sure that we get the timing well enough. So the Survey Monkey's a great idea. And I think we need some information to go with it. I mean, I talk to people at, cocktail parties or Christmas parties, and everyone's talking about this. And it's always a knee-jerk reaction from really smart people. Why do we need it? Let's just sue everybody. There's not a lot of information to go through, why the town is doing this.
Mhm.
And notwithstanding all the meetings that we've had over the past year, it's going to be a shock to people or a surprise or what's going on here. So I don't know if we need to spread it out a little bit, but I think the Survey Monkey's a great idea. That might be the event that gets people focusing on it.
Mhm.
And we can't have too much information in there that we get too much in the weeds. But by the same token, and we don't want to be scaring people, but I think we need information in there, why this is important, why the town is undertaking to do this. Here's what we're trying to address.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we have enough time to do it. Although the staging, I think that you had is perfect.
Well, so I think let's, if everyone's willing, table this until after the presentation, and then we'll have to make some harder decisions at that point about, whether we're ready to go, how quickly we want to go, and move forward from there. Maria, do you want to come say something? You grab a microphone just so everyone can hear you. This is Maria Weingarten. She's also a member of the Full Affordable Housing.
Hi, sorry, I was listening on my way in, so I heard the whole conversation. I just want to be clear that we're not mandated to build the housing. What we're mandated to do is to zone for the creation of affordable units. That's what generally has been stated, and that's what, all of these bills, 8,002, it's not about that we have to meet, and that 10% is a threshold. It's not the actual, it's not, according to them, it's not the goal. And that might not even be what it's going to be after fair share and whatever else gets, thrown at us. But again, in fair share, it's not about building the units. And so what we have done as a town is go above and beyond, because we're building it and we're building 100% forever affordable. We're not just having mass development happening where we're just having a little bit of inclusionary, or we're having a lot of 830Gs thrown at us, and that's how our number is getting there. So I think it's important to remember that's also part of all of this as well. And that given everything that's happened with 8,002, a lot can change. And whether towns, we're even going to, because part of the reason we're doing this is because we want our moratoriums, because we want to get relief from 830G. And given what's happened in that bill, that may not be a possible, depending on what committees have to review our affordable housing plans and what they decide, that might not necessarily be in our control anymore.
I understand and I agree, but I think we also have to work within the legal context that we are currently living and not necessarily predict we can't predict how this is going to go in the future. And right now, 830G is still law, and we still have a plan. At least I think we haven't changed course and said we don't want to pursue moratoriums. Right. So if that's the case, then this is the path we're on.
So going back, what is our charter? What's our, what did we set out to do here? So for example, the question that Rita just brought up, should we even worry about that, or is that something for the town council to worry about others?
What, 8,002?
Well, in the sense of obstacles getting in the way of a recommendation. So we come up with all united about a recommendation, I was like, it's terrific. But, maybe we don't need to do it. And so, what is it we're saying? That if we were to do something, this is what we should do? Or are we saying, this is what we should do? And then going back, we looked at 3 sites, and there were 3 or 4 sites that we didn't look at. But I'm sure when the town sort of rolls this out, there'll be a lot of people who think that the 3 sites we looked at aren't exactly the right ones. 30 others we should have looked at. So is that something we should be worried about? Obviously, as citizens we worry about it. But,
Planning is an iterative process. It's never a straight line. Will we get pushback? Will we end up looking at more support when we haven't looked at more? We might, but I think our ordinance that created us specifies that we are supposed to continue to pursue rolling moratoriums. And so in order to do that, the town has to build approximately 75 units every 4 years, or have someone store like we do right now in order to make that possible. So all we're doing is presenting an option for how the town could continue on that path, if that's the path they want to go on. If the course changes, then, this all becomes moot.
And Maria, just going back to something you said, is it to qualify for a moratorium under 830G, don't we have to have a certificate of occupancy for
Yes.
units? Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So it's not enough that we've zoned for it or we're planning to do it. That might satisfy the new law.
Right.
But under 830G, we still have to have buildings that can be occupied to apply for the moratorium.
But they added in the caveat that if depending on how these housing plans come forth in the next few years, and that will be an issue in 2028, 2029, it's very possible that they're not going to approve our plan potentially. And if they don't approve our plan, we can't get a moratorium going forward. So it's sort of a catch. It's sort of like you're going to be doing all of this and you're not guaranteed that, again, they've moved the goalpost. They have.
Yeah.
And so it's another hurdle that wasn't there. It was very clear before. Now it's extremely opaque. And that's the concern I have, is that we're going to be expending dollars and efforts here when what's been put forth is a very not a transparent process at all.
And I think that's an executive decision.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's above our pay grade.
That we as a committee say this was our mandate to achieve a rolling moratorium under 830G. Here's what we would recommend. And then the strategy for pursuing that or not, and
And the
trying to
risk,
like look at
Yeah.
in the crystal ball of what Hartford's gonna do is kind of a like first selectman and town council elected
Political
officials decision. And we can only do our best with what we're asked to do and to look at and present it in that way and then pass the ball.
Yeah.
By the way, to the other part of your point, Bill, I think you make a really good point about what about the other town-owned lands that you didn't explore? We can explain why. And I think that's going to be important
Yeah.
and a good reminder.
So I think so I
Pressure
realize we
testing.
have a timeline, but I think getting a little more time up front, because it sounds like there are a lot of things we need to be prepared to, you know, to articulate,
to
but also
explain,
agree
yeah.
on, right?
Yep.
And the last thing we want is somebody to say, well, I don't remember that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think,
Maria's right. I mean, the ground is shifting, right? But I think it can shift a lot more too. I mean, what's gonna happen, in the next session, next year? I think we have to keep focus on, what the ordinance asks us to do.
Mhm.
And who knows, all the work may be for naught, might be a year from now and the thing gets deep six because the law's changed, there's a new statute that's being proposed. But, the goal was to try to get the town to get control and to do it in a proactive way
Right.
rather than a reactionary way that we're reacting. So I think that's what our
Right.
focus should be.
Is there some level of legal, right? It may not be us in the town, like the officials. At some point, we probably somebody needs to give legal advice. I'm sure that's happening. Right, from this committee as to, well, if we do A, B, and C, and what positions that put us in vis-a-vis the state. And
Yeah.
what is our legal strategy? Is that town council?
no, I mean,
No.
I think that would be, the first selectman would probably need to get any advice on that. And I think we should invite our legislatures to our public meeting where we talk about this stuff so that they can see what we're doing, can hopefully advocate for us in Hartford, which would be nice, if they were aware of, here's what we're doing, and we are going down this avenue. And if somebody has some, inside baseball that like,
Right.
don't do it because everything's going to change, or, I would do it this way or tweak it, that's as important to hear too. I think as it is even from our fellow residents who might say, you can't build that on Richmond Hill or whatever. But I think in this survey, I think it's good to provide links. I think a really simple
Yeah.
preamble is good. This is what the law, this is how we people here know 830G after Weed Street and Hill Street and the Red Cross building, I think. Here's what we have to do. Our mandate is to do this. Here are the three options that we've come to. And it's like, this isn't a choice,
Right.
like to do or not to do. That's for
Right.
the first selectman really to decide whether to pursue it as a strategy or not, given the shifting landscape. But we need 75 units, or we need X number of units. Here are the three proposals for doing it. Let us know what you think. I think there's a simple way to do it with links if you want more information, but I wouldn't inundate people with information at the beginning of the survey.
Yeah.
Just assume they have some basic knowledge, and if they don't, you go. But anyway.
Okay. So if you guys are okay with it, I just want to make sure we leave plenty of time for the main course. Let's table this and we'll revisit it at the end under next steps, which is on our agenda. So now I'd like to turn it over to Miles and Jeremy with Amenta Emma, who are going to give us the site plans that they've drawn up, 2 for each of the 3 sites that we asked them to look at, which are Richmond Hill, Locust Avenue, and the Lumberyard lot. So Miles and Jeremy, it's all you.
Great, thank you everyone. Yeah, I'll give a quick intro and then I'll turn it over to Jeremy to present. But yeah, I really appreciate trusting us in this exercise, and thank you very much for allowing us to be remote. It's very helpful, and I think it'll be helpful for you to see everything on the big screen too as we go forward. But the only disadvantage to us is we get to be supersized on your screen over there. But yeah, no, thank you very much. So just to kind of a reminder of our task at hand. As Krista mentioned, we looked at the 3 sites, Richmond Hill, Locust Avenue, and Lumberyard. And the task was really to determine what the maximum yield for housing was on each of those sites, using some reasonable assumptions. Reasonable parking that would allow for the existing parking to remain, plus what would be needed for the housing. We assumed a reasonable height limitation of 3 to 4 stories to sort of fit into the neighborhood. We're not like with Canaan Parish, it's not an 830G, but it's sort of a friendly interpretation of an 830G within the, sort of a reasonable assumptions. We're not going up 7 stories. We're trying to make it fit into the context of the neighborhood. So we did that. We looked at 2 options for each scheme. And so I'll let Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you to share your screen and kind of walk through those options at a sort of a high level. And we'll pause after each site, I think, for some questions. So we don't, it's going to be a lot. But go ahead, Jeremy. I'll let you share your screen.
So committee members, I just want to let Jeremy get through each site before we chime in with questions. So at the end of each site, we can ask questions.
Okay, I have a setup question though.
Yeah.
Could you remind us how we decided to do 2 alternatives and how the alternatives were different? Just so as we're seeing this, we're keeping that in mind.
So I know that we wanted to see the maximum sort of yields. That's one of them. And then I guess different layouts to meet that maximum yield. What would you say, Miles?
Yeah, I would say it's really just helpful to look at things in more than one way. I mean, if we had only done one option per site, inevitably somebody would say, "Did you think about this?" And you probably still will say that, "Did you?" Because you can look at something a number of different ways. So I guess we try to. I think in every option, we still try to look at ways to maximize the site, although there's like a range. There's not like a super high and a super low. But yeah, I mean, I just think as planners and designers, it's hard to look at something one way. So we could, is that clear?
Uh-huh.
Does that work for you, John?
Answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I just need someone to enable sharing on the Zoom.
How do I do that?
Oh, Hillary.
Oh, no.
said you knew what
Host
you were doing.
tools, let's see. Enable, hold on.
You want me to do
Share screen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did it. Okay, try now. Is that working?
It
Do I make you
appears
a
to be.
There you go.
Great.
Look at me, I'm so tech savvy.
You're running all the meetings from here on out.
You're here.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, everybody. Excited to share the work that we've done here. Found it helpful to just kind of pause for a second and use an aerial photograph to talk about the 3 sites, really high level, right? So we've got Richmond Hill, which is in the number 1 down kind of bottom right corner, Locust Avenue, which is top right corner, and Lumberyard, which is on the left-hand side of the screen here. And just some quick kind of ideas of where we're going with unit and parking counts. These are total units and total parking spaces. We'll get into kind of net gains and stuff like that. But I think having everything at the exact same scale, because the scales are going to fluctuate as we go, you can see there that Richmond Hill is a pretty tiny site compared to the Lumberyard and Locust Avenue, somewhere in between, and that susses out in the studies that we did. So we're going to go in this order. We'll start with the smallest, Richmond Hill. We'll go into Locust Avenue, and then we'll finish the presentation with Lumberyard. As we talked about, there's going to be 2 schemes for each. We're going to talk in architectural terms sometimes. So bar building is one that I always like to use, and Miles reminded me that I have to define that sometimes. So for those that know Canaan Parish, a bar building is just kind of, it's a double loaded corridor. It's a super efficient way to lay out a multifamily building. We really minimize the amount of circulation and maximize the number of units. So one of the first things we always do in these multifamily developments is see if there's a way to get an extremely efficient building onto the site, which becomes even more important on these super tight sites that are going to be driven by parking. So the first scheme is to try and see, can we get a bar building footprint, which is about 65 feet out to work on this site. And that's what you're seeing kind of in that L shape there. The other thing that this kind of layout allowed us to do was push the building back from the street and align with kind of the buildings to the north and to the south of us in terms of where it sits, the front yard between the face of our building and Park Street. In both of the schemes for Richmond Hill, you're going to see that we need structured parking. That existing parking layout that's there is pretty efficient. And once we add the residential component to this, we need additional parking. So there's going to be kind of a parking deck. You can see the outer limits and the shadow lines here, but we're going to show you some 3D imagery that will help kind of drive that home. And the other thing is because this site is so tight, neither scheme were we able to kind of get a structured parking or anything with a ramp. So we're in both schemes going to be looking at an entry to the upper level parking off of Park Street and to the lower level parking off of Richmond Hill Road. This kind of L-shaped bar building does get us to 20 units with the appropriate parking. So you can see we're going to maintain the parking that's there, and then we're going to park our units at 1.2 parking spaces per unit. Again, kind of aerial views of these to help everybody understand kind of the geometry. It's always a little tough when we show these because none of us will ever experience them. You know, maybe the birds and the seagulls around here will experience the buildings like this, but it is a really great tool in understanding how the building lays out on the site and seeing kind of all the geometry here. One of the reasons we wanted to dive in, and you're going to see 3D for each of these, is because each site has a pretty significant slope drop off. That's why on this particular site, we can get kind of 2 entries without doing a whole lot of excavation work. The entry on Richmond Hill Road is almost a full story below the Park Street based on the topography that we have. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing kind of this raised parking deck, which would allow for 2-way circulation around a small parking area. And then down below that, kind of the grade level parking off of Richmond Hill Road is fairly similar to what you see out there today. Then just some 2D plans to help everybody kind of digest what they're looking at in the 3D images. So the lowest level plan, again, with that entry off of Richmond Hill Road, is a 2-way circulation around. It's fairly similar to the parking lot you guys have out there now. The street level plan along Park Street, again, 2-way entry and circulate around and back out with kind of a half-depth building here. You may have seen it in the last image, but the upper floors of this building kind of overhang the park under, which is something that we utilize. I think Canyon Parish utilizes that as well. The efficiency of this building allowed us to keep it kind of on the shorter side, right? So we're only looking at 3 stories here, but it is a big footprint. And unfortunately, one of the things we were trying to achieve here that we weren't able to was to completely separate the residential parking from the kind of train station parking. So we lost a few spaces on the lower level once you start to look for structure and kind of circulation. And so there's not kind of an easy way to split those two. So both parking lots would have to be open potentially to both groups of people.
Jeremy, do you know how short you are on that lower level of parking relative to the requisite replacement of what's existing?
It's around 8 spaces short of what's there currently. Yep. So we made up for the 8 spaces in the upper deck, and then added additional parking to get to those units.
Okay.
The other thing I should say about that is, you guys saw it's 3 stories. It's, those types of buildings, we can go taller, but really what's driving the unit count in this particular site, even more than the others, is that parking ratio. So we can't fit any more parking on the site, so therefore we can't fit any more units on the site. So especially in that first scheme, that's kind of where we ended up. As Miles mentioned, we always like to think about these in a couple different ways. And given where we are in New Canaan and kind of moving into this residential neighborhood, it's less commercial. We're not even looking at commercial space here. Those kind of big behemoth bar buildings can feel a little bit out of scale in these kinds of neighborhoods. So this is a townhouse style development that we've utilized in the past. And so what it is it's kind of a single unit flat that gets us our accessibility, and then townhouses on top of it. So it's a 3-story stack that gets us 3 units per chunk. So you're seeing a much narrower footprint, But in order to make this work, we did have to slide the building a little closer to Park Street. So there's still plenty of room between the sidewalk and the face of the building. And you can start to think about these as a very active streetscape, right? There's going to be front doors along Park Street, potentially, that will allow people to kind of come and go and access that sidewalk that takes everybody up to the train station and to the shopping district. This also utilizes an upper and lower deck, as I mentioned. The upper deck here is kind of a one-way circulation with angled parking to work with the geometry of the buildings, and the lower deck is very similar to what you saw before. Because this is a townhouse-style development, we did get just a few less units at 18, and then the parking supports that as well. You see we're a little more, it's a 1.22 ratio as opposed to the 1.2 ratio that we saw in the last scheme. But at this scale, that's fairly comparable to one another.
And were you able to specify the parking relative to each level?
No, this again, the upper level will need to provide around 8 additional spaces to train station parking relative to the lower level. That's there now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now you're seeing kind of how this shakes out three-dimensionally. Again, there's that kind of parking deck up on the second floor that has that almost kind of smooth transition out to Park Street. And you are kind of, as you go along Richmond Hill Road in either scheme, you are seeing the building is gonna kind of have to transverse that decline in slope there. So there is a moment in the building that will feel a little taller, but for the most part, both of these buildings are around 3 stories. And this one's a little easier to explain in the 2D. So there's just a lower level and an upper level because there's no building overhang here. It's kind of just the footprint extruded up. So as you can see down on that lower level, it's simplified a little bit along Richmond Hill Road, pushing that entry as far to the property line as we can get it. And then along Park Street, we're kind of coming in between the townhouses. And then just a summary slide. So I know we're going to pause here for questions, comments, and just kind of showing the 2 schemes side by side and the yield that each one of them had. So again, 18 to 20 units. So you're seeing scheme 1 has 20 units and scheme 2 has 18. And then the parking and parking ratio support that level of development in each of these schemes. Miles, did I miss anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think you hit it, Jeremy. It's open for questions.
I have a question. Looking at scheme 2, is there a sort of freestanding townhouse on the other side of the Park Street
Entrance?
Yeah. So is it contiguous building, and then is that a single?
It's a couple.
It's a single set of those units, right? So it's a flat with 2 townhouses on top of it. So it's kind of a 3-unit block. And then as you move through this L shape, right now we're showing it as like one contiguous shape, but that would be broken down into several smaller pods. It does give us an opportunity to really break down the massing and the scale of these things, because we can kind of highlight the individual units or the pods of units as opposed to the larger L-shaped building in scheme 1.
And do you have a sense in either of the schemes or both of the schemes what the makeup of the units would be? Would they be 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms? Would the townhouses have 3 or?
It'd probably be like a 50-50, 1 and 2, maybe with some 3, a minor amount of 3s mixed in.
Okay.
So Miles, you guys used a sort of generic square footage that could be.
Yeah, usually,
manipulated.
1,100 square feet a unit gets you around that, 50-50, 1 and 2. If you go maybe a little bit more, about 1,200, you start to get into some a little bit more 3s in there too as well. But
I have a question about the parking ratio. First, I believe we've heard that Canaan Parish is that maybe built at 1.5, and then no, is it less than that?
it's about 1.5.
I thought it was less, but that's.
Oh, okay.
My recollection is it was less.
It's less than 1.5.
We're about 1 over at Millport.
And Millport's 1, because I know that the the feeling at Canaan Parish is that Millport didn't have enough,
Right.
but Canaan Parish does have enough. Is the
It works
sense,
better.
it was better. So it's not as high as
But you don't
1.5.
recall, you don't
That's what I was gonna
recall
ask.
the ratio.
The other question I have about parking is, this is to allow for every space that exists currently. My impression, but I could be wrong, was that this was the one site where that lot is
Less
full
utilized.
these days.
Right.
Yeah, I
As
think
a general
I
rule.
think there's a real objective to try and separate the parking so that the commuters come in at one level and the residents come in at a different level. You'll save a lot of contention if people are assigned to a
Yeah,
level.
maybe we can get rid of 8 spaces and
Yeah,
be
that's
able
what
to
I
do
was-
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my question.
I think that's a great question for the parking department. What is the demand on that lot?
Yeah.
And, how many permits are issued? Is it full? Do you have that? Oh, yeah. I
So,
think that's a great question.
I did reach out to
Yeah.
Stacy, I
Yeah.
believe her name is. I did not get a response, but I think now that we have this,
Did you retire?
She retired.
She retired.
yeah, so I need to figure out who
No
to
wonder.
Yeah.
Email?
We'll figure that. We can find out.
But yes, I
Yeah.
think that that's a good point. And I mean, I think the main thing I see on this is that the need to replace the parking, the commuter parking 1-for-1 is really what's driving the development potential on this site. And ultimately, 20 units is not going to get us a moratorium. And to build decked parking for 20 units is going to cost a lot of money. So we can table this till the end, but I think we need to question
Yeah,
going
yeah.
forward whether Richmond Hill is a viable option that we want the public to opine on. I mean, is it a viable option?
No,
Of course.
I think we want to talk about the strategy of how we're going to roll this out and what
Yeah.
we want to present and all that kind of stuff. And we may just say, it's nice to show. them.
Because I think a lot of people would look at this and be like, yeah, if this helps us get our moratorium, then let's just do this. Like, I don't want to build on the lumberyard. I just want 20 units on Richmond Hill. But the answer is that's not going to actually achieve the ends that we set out for. It could help,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna do it.
I agree.
Is it within scope for us to consider if we were to buy one plot of land that's owned by someone else, not the town, would that dramatically change this?
Well, so I think what would dramatically change this, and it's something that was discussed a little bit when we did the site visit, is if we didn't need to replace that parking 1-for-1, if there were another alternative. For instance, it's been thrown out before, the parking garage that apparently exists under the Walgreens, but has never been fully developed and utilized. If somehow that could become commuter parking, then you have a lot more options. It still may not be a moratorium development on this site. When I say moratorium, I mean enough units to get us to a moratorium. But you could build a lot more housing and if you don't have to have all that parking. So if we could find a solution that offloads the parking, the commuter parking on this site somewhere else, then you have a lot of other
How do
options.
we follow up either or on some other alternative? I mean, I'm not trying to sell and buy anybody's land, but there are a couple of things that jump to mind if you did A, B, or C.
Well, so I think the first question we'll have to ask ourselves as we get closer to the end of this evening is if Richmond Hill doesn't have the potential to get us to a moratorium fully on its own for 2032, is this a conversation worth continuing to have? If it is, then yeah, there's questions that need to be answered. But I think the first question is, do we keep this one on the list going forward?
If we only needed resident parking and didn't need commuter parking, how many, do you have any idea how that changes with the buildable area?
It's not going to be very much more. We did look at that. I think we're only going to, it's a 3-story building now. How tall do we really want to go? Like our footprint of the building's not going to get really any bigger with either option, right, Jeremy? It's kind of what we saw.
Yeah,
So like you could add, in scheme, well, basically in both schemes, if you added one more floor, you'd get like 7 more units or something, right, Jeremy? I think.
Yeah, scheme 1 would get us up maybe 10 more units.
10 more units. Okay.
Yeah, but certainly not enough to get us anywhere close to the 75.
So we'd have to go pretty tall on this site to get 75.
Right.
Yeah, we'd be in that 7-story building that we're trying to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this
Yeah.
is a really interesting potential, though. I'm glad that this is done and we see what's possible there in a modest build, because we know across the street, it's not a modest build. But
Right.
I think that this is a very interesting small ball approach if we need it. I don't know that it solves the problem we're trying to right now, but I think it's incredibly useful to have this in our back pocket.
I do too. I agree with you. But I think Krista points out the most important factor here is building that deck makes the whole thing very expensive on a
Yes.
per unit basis.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost a no-go project. Like almost nobody would build this, right, with a deck. It would be it wouldn't pencil, right? So you're probably looking at a 30, if we could get it, would we even get it to work at a 30 unit with no deck, Jeremy, I guess? We could look at that, but
Well, that's what I was just going to say is I think if the requirement for any train station parking left, then I think you could get rid of the deck. I don't know that you could get to 30 units. You'd probably max out around 25-ish.
yeah, I was gonna say 25
Yeah.
and probably more like option 2, because you could get more parking with that scheme and
Mm-hmm.
not have to park over it,
Yep.
This is good too, and this is not within our mandate, but I'm just saying it out loud, is if there's some requirement for like middle housing or something, that's a smaller number, this could be included in a plan to provide middle housing, because a townhouse style development like scheme 2, I think would be very well received for middle or senior middle housing. So I think this is a really good,
Why do we limit
information.
ourselves to 3 stories? I think you said 3 stories, right? Because isn't the view 4 stories and that's right across from it?
And it's on a great,
It's on
It's a lot higher.
an uplift.
So, that was the first thing you said, was why 3, everything else?
Yeah.
Really
Well,
4,
so I
and
mean, I
4,
think I'll let them answer that question, but you do have just to the west of this site on Richmond Hill, a single family home. So I do think we
a
have,
series of single family
yeah,
homes.
we have,
It's
I mean, we're in a
transition.
transition zone between what's at the View and single family homes on Richmond
Actually,
Hill. And
after the first single family, there may be another one, but
Then there's like
it's multifamily.
But it's
Yeah.
all of that scale.
Sort of
2
townhome
floors.
style.
It's all
Although-
two-story, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the primary concern is the first house, obviously.
Yeah.
That's right on it. But I think there's gonna be future development going down Richmond Hill, given the zone that it's in and given
Yeah.
it butting up against
The
back
commercial in
of,
the back.
Pine Street.
Yeah.
And it is multifamily now, most of those, even they're like 2 families or 3 families. But the initial houses would be, So, a general question on this parking garage and all the others that you're going to be showing us. I'm assuming that they're open to the environment with ventilation, that we're not adding on costs of fans and I know the engineering that has to be done for a closed structure.
On 2 sides.
This one certainly would be. All of them, I'm not sure when we go through the other schemes, but there's a couple that we kind of wrap the building, but yeah, this one definitely would be.
Okay.
And just to go back
Good
and
question,
address the 3-story comment for a second, one of the things that's driving the 3 stories is like we're maxed out on units, right? So we could, in scheme 1, for instance, we could add a 4th floor. We just can't, there's not enough available parking for the units that would be up there. So really, I think this site, the parking on this site dictates that the 3-story buildings are really going to be it for us.
But the deal is, I mean, we'll get to phase 2. when we get away.
Turn your mic on just so they can hear you.
Right next slide. Thanks.
Okay. Are you guys, I mean, we can obviously circle back to this at the
Yeah,
end, but
no,
you guys
yeah.
ready to go on and hear the
Yep.
next one? All right. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Great. So Locust Avenue, when we took a look at this, I know there was like a lot of conversation around this. One of the things was kind of that firehouse, kind of page south of us here, across Locust Avenue. There is some potential to connect over to Heritage Hill Road. There is some potential to connect over to Forest Street. Again, this is a site that has a lot of topography. We'll look at it in 3 dimensions in a minute, but one of the first things in each of these that we're going to do is look at kind of, if we were coming in as the most efficient way to do this project, again, those kind of double loaded corridor buildings are always one of the first things we like to look at. It gets us the biggest bang for our buck. Additionally, when we're looking at a lot of parking, and again, we're trying to get to over 250 spaces of parking here, structured parking, kind of, if we can do it with precast concrete or kind of engineered buildings like that, it is less expensive inherently than kind of these big, large span decks from a parking standpoint. So this site is not quite big enough to do kind of one of those switchback ramps, parking garages that we see at a lot of the bigger stations. So this looks at kind of a flat plate garage with these speed ramps. So you're seeing kind of these long plates of parking here with these dedicated ramps that are a little more aggressive in slope than those switchback garages. This allows us to get a lot of parking in a fairly small, compact footprint. What it also allows us to do from a development standpoint is wrap the building around the parking, because these are flat plate. Every level is flat. You can access the back of the units, and there's kind of a hallway that would work its way around those parking garages. So kind of, again, looking at how can we maximize the site for both parking and units, but also thinking about this from an experiential standpoint. So along Locust Avenue, we're going to kind of give ourselves a building facade with some commercial space down on the lowest level, maintain the entry and exit out onto Locust Avenue, push this kind of garage and ramp over towards these, I think the post office is here. So for that more commercially side of the site, and then start to pull back a little bit from Heritage Hill Road, which we know goes out into the residential neighborhood. This also allowed us to not have a giant kind of building face along Heritage Hill Road, and even create some green space. So when we get into the kind of plans of this, you'll see the parking comes under this section, but from grade, you'd be looking in at some sort of landscaped area with residential units down on the ground floor. We were able to get to 89 units here. The existing parking is around 140, and we went up to 263. So the net gain there is 120 spaces, which gets us a little over parked at 1.36 for the 1.2 that we've been targeting. And that's kind of the nature of these. You know, we establish the garage footprint and we stack it, and so we end up with a couple extra spaces as we go up. And so here that is three-dimensionally. So you're seeing kind of, again, we didn't have this on Richmond Hill, which is this light blue color, and it'll show up in all the schemes going forward, which gets us that little bit of commercial space along Locust Avenue. You're seeing kind of working within the slopes and the kind of terrain here. The building does start to come down a little bit as we get closer to Heritage Hill. It's like 3.5 stories. And then as we move down away from Heritage Hill, you're seeing kind of a little more exposure as the site slopes down, almost a full story there as well. And so we're going to start to terrace the building as we move back to shrink some of that massing to not be at 5 stories by the time, or 6 stories by the time we get to those residential buildings on the backside. And again, here's that. It's a fairly simple plan. As I mentioned, from the street, you would not see this kind of expanded parking footprint, but this would be happening within the existing terrain that's there today. And then a building footprint in this kind of U-shaped wrap. So this hints at what Miles was saying a minute ago. This garage, we would have to study a little bit more to see if we could do it as an open air. We can do some interesting things where we pull the building back in some places to get some airflow down there. But for the most part, to maximize this site with a structured parking garage, we would need to wrap the 3 sides to get to our unit count that we were targeting.
And how many spaces are on the bottom, the lower level?
So, I'm sorry, the lowest level is 83, and then it's about 45 per floor going up from there.
Okay.
In scheme 2, we go back to let's look at kind of a parking deck again. Can we create this as a 2-tiered deck? This site has a lot more flexibility in it in terms of, as I mentioned at the beginning, our entry and exit points, excuse me. So the lowest level, kind of coming underneath what you're seeing here now, and we'll get into that in just a second, we can provide entry and exit if we do acquire that property towards Forest Street that we've talked about in the past. There can be an entry and exit driveway there. We're still showing entry and exit along Locust Avenue to that lower level. If that did start to become an issue with the fire department there, we can just turn our attention to that Forest Street entry and exit. And then this upper level deck would be accessed off of Heritage Hill Road. So we'd be creating a new kind of curb cut there as well. This building looks at, again, that double loaded corridor style building, really looking at kind of focusing on Locust Avenue and the kind of parking lot space with an L shape. And then also recognizing that we want to start to screen some of that parking and also a nod to that residential neighborhood. So the idea of maybe some small townhouses out towards the Heritage Hill side of the site. Total units is 76. Building 1 is that large L-shaped double loaded corridor, so that's 67 units, and then we're getting 9 units out here closer to the street edge. The existing parking is 142. The provided parking is 234. So we're up about 92 spaces, which puts us right at that 1.2 ratio that we've been talking about. And here it is 3-dimensionally. So you're seeing kind of the building is 3 stories along Locust Avenue, but as you turn, it's 3 stories above Heritage Hill Road, I should say. And because of the slope, Locust Avenue has a little bit more of kind of a 3.5, 4-story feel. Because we're fully parking that lower level, there is no commercial space along Locust Avenue in this particular scheme. If we lost some parking, we could introduce a small commercial zone along Locust Avenue. You're also seeing that kind of as we get towards the back of the site, this building is really 2 stories floating above the parking. So there is kind of a stretch of covered parking on that upper deck there.
And that would require the purchase of that property that heads out towards Forest Street. You see 2 buildings there; those would have to come down. That Jeremy's circling.
Yeah, thank you, Miles. I meant to ghost those. They're not coming in correctly, but
it's okay.
And so here's kind of that lower level, which we've again gone back and kind of reconfigured the parking to look at something flat, so it's not terrace like what's out there now. So there may be a little bit of cut and fill to balance the site. We are showing kind of 2 entry and exit points here, one to Forest Street, one to Locust Avenue. The idea of what the commercial space might look like, this would be elevated relative to Locust Avenue. So if we can get some of the grades to work there. And here's that entry and exit to Heritage Hill Road. So you're going to come out and then it's 2-way circulation under the building, wrapping around and then back out. And then as we get above that parking, so floors 2 and 3 of that L-shaped building would be kind of a full double loaded corridor L shape. So again, 76 to 89 units. I think one of the other things we could not get all of the train station parking or all of the parking that's currently on the site in here. I think it's a little bit short. I know we had talked about maybe there's some kind of town parking that happens in that current lot, and maybe we can balance that with the residential to get that kind of secluded parking, right? So the residents are only on the upper deck and everybody else is on that lower deck.
He just means public.
It's all commercial. It's
merchants.
We're just clarifying, Jeremy, that there's no commuter parking here. It's all.
Oh, okay.
The town hall allocated lots, and then there's another 20 or 30 merchants.
Right.
And
So
the rest of it is come and go.
Yes.
Can you hear what Jotha is saying, Jeremy?
Yes.
And so we have a lot more flexibility on how replacing we have a lot more flexibility replacing the existing parking, even if we should come up a little bit short.
Well, and I also think we have flexibility, and it doesn't all have to be on the ground level, right? Like if we say to the town employees, you're parking on level 2 or whatever, like.
I agree with you there because people are accustomed to walking off the street into the parking when they go to Forest Street or, any of the shopping around that area. And so that would be a good thing to assume is that we're going to continue providing that first level access.
Right, for the public, and then reserve spaces maybe higher up in the deck.
And in scheme 2, if let's say money's no object and the homeowners don't care and we buy those 2 houses that would need for the exit. Potentially we could put parking there, could we not? Where right now it's like green space. You could have like either municipal parking or employee parking there or
Yeah.
even free parking.
I mean,
for
at the one surface, just the service level parking.
Yeah, that backs up to
Just-
the,
Pulling
Post
right,
office?
yeah,
Yeah.
that square green space right there.
Yeah.
So similarly, you'd have to get approval of it, but you
Yeah.
could really maybe deck over the parking that's there behind the post office. Because that's sort of stuck in between two 4-story buildings. I'm not sure it's a good
That's
idea.
true.
I mean, that's not town owned though, so
That's
that-
not.
it's not owned by the
No,
town.
I agree.
Yeah, so that's, a-
So, when you're looking at a project like this, or the earlier one we looked at, are there other things that jump out at you in terms of changing what the town has to do? For example, can the fire department, I realize she's caught before the horse, but can the fire department handle something like this? And, it's a whole new dimension. Maybe the answer is yes. And I don't think there's any other place we have parking like this, right, in town, where it's second level or third level. And I'm not sure that's good or bad. And then the final thought I had is, when would you get a traffic study done? Would this be later on? Because, some of these areas are pretty congested already, right?
Bill, I think you're right on that. When I think of Locust Avenue, it's more than just accommodating the coming and going of the fire department. That gets backed up there. It's almost like a parking lot in its own right, much of the
Right.
day.
Yeah, so
yeah.
So if you do this, you almost have to figure out how you're going to get those second and third egresses.
yeah, and I'm sort of wondering, Forest Street has turned into Restaurant Row, right? And it's a pretty tough street to get down now.
this is the more residential side on the other side of Locust. I mean, and Forest
Locust-
would be one way coming towards that part of Forest.
Yeah.
You're not really coming out of this exit and going up where the restaurants are because it's a one-way street in the opposite
I
direction.
was just saying it's very crowded.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a challenging area of town, I think, in terms of traffic congestion. To answer a couple of your questions, Bill, the traffic study would have to be part of any planning and zoning application, but to your point, it may also drive the design decisions in terms of how you would design this building. So you might want to do it earlier. The fire study in terms of, accessibility, they opine to planning and zoning on these types of things. But I'm sure also that Amentum has designed many buildings and they have a sense, they know exactly what the fire code allows
Yeah,
for.
no,
So,
sure.
they're not drawing anything here that couldn't be legal.
Miles and Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, we always meet with the fire marshal, fire department, once we start to get past this early phase and they may say something, but yeah, we're using code, best practice in these early phases.
I'm sure of that. I was just more wondering about equipment and capability.
Mhm.
I have no idea if there's a special skill
I
you
can
need.
tell you the response times would be really good at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're leaving an open
Yeah,
space,
exactly.
on all- on all sides of the building. Like, yeah, I think they would fight the fire on the oh my gosh, Forest Avenue side of the building and from that parking lot where the post office is, and we're not butting right up against that, so you technically can, but.
So Miles, what's the appearance of this, of both of these projects, looking from the upper left-hand corner? I don't know I would tell you what the direction is, but I don't know what that direction is. Looking from Heritage Hill towards the project on that upper left-hand corner.
What are the people in those
Yeah,
houses?
I don't think we have do you have a view from that? You can see it.
So that's exposed deck parking
Yeah.
on this
Mhm.
scheme. Yeah, okay.
And you're really getting kind of the face of the U-shaped building in this scheme. So that parking
That's a-
garage and the parking is really only visible from the Forest, the post office parking lot side of this building.
Yeah.
Yeah, for that reason, I liked the second option. There's a couple of reasons why I like the second option on this one, but I think putting the parking up against that residential on Heritage Hill is not ideal. I
Yeah,
think having
and
it,
the fellow who built that 12 unit, what it is, he has options to going down that hill. So we probably get somebody objecting there.
Yeah.
People objecting
Yeah,
on
I
all
know,
sides.
but I'm just thinking,
But yeah.
he's got a real strong interest to preserve that view.
Right.
I do
But
think
he
scheme
also
two is,
got right next to a town parking lot, so
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't know what you're gonna get.
yeah.
And I don't have any numbers, but I do think that scheme two is a little less expensive on a per unit cost. It's a little bit simpler building, just the sort of two deck, one deck really, and parking underneath. Your yield is a little bit less there, but I do think it's a simpler construction build.
So we don't get big benefit by building the garage above grade? I thought that was like the middle ground between underground parking and well, I just always thought it was less expensive to build above grade parking structure than it was to build where you were building below grade.
Right. Well, we sort of on scheme two, there's probably a little bit of dugout parking, Jeremy, but I mean, most of it is kind of like almost at grade as it is today. So like we're building a deck over 10 feet above the grade that it is today for the second level ish, 10, 12 feet, whatever. So it really isn't underground parking in scheme two.
Miles, I thought it was less expensive to build parking garage on parking garage than it was to build apartments on top of a parking deck. Because structure's less expensive. It's not finished. And I don't know. That's just what I
yeah.
thought I understood.
I think there's a lot more complicated factors when you sort of like look at everything here. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they're wildly different in cost. And maybe if I had a CM look at it, it would tell me something a little bit different. But scheme two feels simpler because it's really just two decks of parking. And yeah.
Okay.
Miles, I assume I know the answer to this question, but is there any option? Well, first off, let's just say out loud that both of these options would get us to a moratorium, right?
Correct.
This is a complete project, if you want to look at it that way, for 2032. Is there any phasing of either of these that would make them more preferable, or are these both basically build in one fell swoop?
Yeah, the phasing is challenging on either of these because of the building the parking. You really have to sort of do that first and then build on top of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we do need to look at the phasing a little bit more carefully, but really, I mean, even in scheme one, you're still tucking parking under most of the footprint. So we do think that you'll see the lumberyard. The lumberyard has some phasing opportunities, but I think in this one it's going to be pretty challenging.
So the other thing I guess I'll point out is we talked about on Richmond Hill how that's not a whole project in a sense. So I think that's the big slash against Richmond Hill. I think the big slash against Locust, if we want to call them out, is the choke point here would be land acquisition, at least for option two.
Yeah.
Which, there's no saying that it could happen or how long it would take. And then the other sort of big challenge I heard on this one is that the traffic in the area may dictate the design. So we'd have to really probably study that before we could say which option,
I think,
how we go forward.
because I looked at that project as, part of our informational thing. So I've spent, anytime I drive by there, I pay attention to the traffic level. And it seems like it's really a tough traffic.
I probably go through that intersection 3 or 4 times a day, maybe more. And the light needs to be fixed. It's a horrible light sequence, and I've been on Tiger about that, but yeah, it's kind of a beast.
I mean,
And
there's times where you're
particularly-
backed up all the way down to Forest at the stop line.
Oh, yeah.
Stop sign.
Yeah. So I do think that that's challenging. Scheme 2 looks less like looming to me, but that's just aesthetic. Like that's just my aesthetic reaction. When I'm just looking at it.
Well, I think it is. I think it fits a little bit nicer, especially the small 3-story building connecting to the
Yeah. And I like that building connecting to Heritage Hill.
Did we say how many stories this actually is or looks like? Did you say 4 stories as you get up towards the firehouse?
It's 3 stories on top of the parking deck, which is a story. So as you kind of get to that right-hand corner here,
You want
You're
to
gonna
flip
be
back to
at
that
4.
3D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be a story or 2 higher than the post office?
I don't know if it would. I mean, I can say from recent applications and planning and zoning, specifically the buildings on the corner of Locust, Forest and Cherry, which we just approved for hotel use.
Yeah.
Those are taller than you would think. I mean, those are probably some of the tallest buildings in the area.
They sit on a platform.
And they
too,
sit up
don't
on a platform above parking. So, there's a cupola on top of the post office that accentuates, doesn't accentuate, but contributes to the height of that.
Yeah.
The new residential building where Red Grape is on the corner of Forest and Locust, that's a 3-story building, but has an elevator shaft that extends above. So 4 stories might be taller than some of the things
Yeah,
around
not
it, but
bad,
I
though.
don't think it would be completely out of context in this location.
Yeah, because the fire department starts to establish an elevation there. It's very
But it's
tall
up on
off the street.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of buildings across the way.
Mm.
That white building, which is 3.5 stories, immediately across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Joe's, which is kind of smallish.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that this has potential.
Yeah.
For sure.
But the
Yeah.
hotel is a good point too, that might be adding
traffic.
to the traffic. So
Yeah.
that would be an important consideration.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty big project. Right?
I think it's a 40 unit hotel, normal hotel. And then it had maybe 8
Long-term
extended
units,
stay and then a little bit of a office retail component included. And they did a traffic study. I guess that could be shared. It's public information. They didn't find with that use a significant addition,
Mhm.
but it's probably a little bit of a different animal than a fully residential.
So
Yeah, the
Chris,
post
do they-
office is
when they look at that, do they look at the incremental above its current use or the incremental to the area?
So they look at both.
Okay.
Yeah, they draw a perimeter and they see what the change within that perimeter is, but then also what the change just from that site
From that side.
would be based on the change in use.
Yeah, I think the post office is 2 stories tall. It sits on grade, no parking underneath. There is attic space, but it's limited
Mhm.
space, so it's set pretty low. I think the commission was pretty happy with the height on that. Next door on the corner, I think dispensation was given on height. I think you're
Mhm.
right. There's elevators, amenities up on top.
On the townhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe on the commercial side on facing
Where the
Locust, not
lines are.
Forest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So,
okay.
so I remember they had loom studies, all that sort of
Yeah,
thing. But
shadow
it
studies,
worked
yeah.
out okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Shadow studies.
I think the tallest building in that area is actually across Forest Street from those new townhomes, not the ones that we're talking about being a hotel. It's kind of a brownish brick
Yeah.
building. I think
Commercial
that's,
building.
yeah,
right?
the tallest, one, and that's also on top of parking.
Yeah.
But I think that's what my recollection is that was the tallest in the area.
I mean, if you're in front of the post office though, and you're looking up, this would be pretty tall.
Yeah, it would.
This is gonna be pretty tall. I think it's reasonable, but
Yep.
I wonder if
Okay.
it would be helpful for us to put a little on that. If you go back to the 3D, Jeremy, this is fine. On the southwest area, like if we put a dimension on the height of the post office and then a dimension on the height of the building, would that be helpful for people, or would you rather not point that out?
I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah.
It's a question people are gonna ask is,
Yeah.
how much does this loom over the surrounding neighborhood? So
Right.
if we have numbers.
We're showing all of these buildings with kind of flat roofs just because that's like, kind of keep things simple, but it might probably, some of them don't, right, Jeremy? Some of them have like pitched
Yeah,
roofs and things
yeah.
like that. But okay, well, we can put some heights on here, I think, and a few key points just to give some reference.
Okay.
All right,
All
great.
All right, now the most exciting plan of the day. That one, Locust is probably the most well, I don't know. They're both pretty complicated, but it's a little more room at Lumberyard.
Are we good to move on to lumberyard?
Yep.
Okay. Again, we're getting bigger as we go. So lumberyard, the story here, as you guys have heard from the last three sites, is parking, but this was a lot. So there's 350 existing spaces of parking. We know we can fit a number of units just because of the size and scale of this particular site. And so getting to, and you can see the provided parking in this particular scheme is 550. To do that in any way but structured parking is very, it's a little difficult without at least some component. You'll see kind of a hybrid method in the next scheme. But this site had enough room for kind of a switchback ramp, very traditional parking garage, which is kind of fairly efficient to build as far as structured parking goes. You can see it takes up a pretty kind of significant chunk of the site. And so how we get the buildings in while also allowing kind of site traffic flow to and out of the parking garage, but also to these buildings that are here. What we did in this scheme is kind of, if you can imagine the parking lot going away and that terrain just kind of evening out as it flows from Elm Street down to the train station. So there's kind of a continuous slope that takes this road from Elm Street down through the site, down to that low point in the corner, and then back up to Elm Street with the slope that's currently there. We're imagining this as kind of commercial space, and you'll see those blue boxes start to show up again as we get into the 3D view. So commercial space along Elm Street. We did pull this building back to allow for that kind of truck turning that we've talked about previously. And the other spot that you'll see some commercial space arrive at is in this corner closest to the train station. So we've pulled the building back. We're trying to start to create a plaza and a pedestrian experience. So if you wanted to kind of come off of Elm Street as a pedestrian and walk through the site to get to the train station, you're not kind of sneaking in between the cars anymore, and you're not kind of trying to find that little moment of break in the fence where you can kind of sneak onto the platform. So really creating a place that people want to be, an experience for pedestrians, and a little bit of kind of street level parking to help with that feel, but also give you quick access to those commercial spaces. So again, we're providing 200 additional spaces on top of the 350 that were already there. And then breaking this into a series of double loaded corridor buildings. Again, that's the kind of efficiency that we can get. Getting a little close on that west side of the site here, but still, to your point from earlier, pulling back far enough that we can get some, it's a fire separation, there's light separation, so we continue to study that as well. We're getting to 156 units in 3 buildings here, which gives us a parking ratio, once you subtract out the things that were the existing spots, around 1.28. So we're getting closer to like 1.3 in this particular scheme. And again, that's the notion of structured parking. We get the floor plates and then we kind of figure out the maximum building size we can have within those 4-story limitations that we provide to ourselves to make sure that we fit into the context. I think, the 3D here is really what tells the tale. The view from Elm Street is going to be kind of the short ends of these buildings. So you're getting about 65 feet of width as it comes out to Elm Street, which is a little smaller than the commercial buildings that face that street currently, but gives it a nice scale. The 4-story is very much within keeping of what's over there. So I think there's a lot of good contextual experience along Elm Street. And even that vehicle and pedestrian experience as you kind of loop through the site will be pretty consistent. You'll have a little bit of exposure of the garage from that kind of entry off of Elm Street into the site. But that's really all you're going to see from that side. It's once you get to the railroad side of the site that garage really becomes kind of visible. We are down at the lowest level of parking that's there. With the garage. So that is kind of at the level of the tracks and coming up, but we're still talking about a 5-story garage here. So that will be visible to the south of the site. And really kind of, we don't have much building mass to block that. And these buildings along that lower street are on the lower side and they're fairly narrow. Those sites are fairly narrow. So you're not ever going to get a ton of height there to help block that long term. Big site, but we were actually able to kind of capture all of this within that one plan. So again, you're seeing that structured parking. We are taking advantage in both schemes to that connection out to Grove Street. So bringing folks in at kind of a mid-level here and giving them both ingress and entry and exit points at both ends of the garage to try and help with, there's 350 people taking the train every day. So there's going to become some times where there's a lot of folks coming and going. And then these kind of smaller buildings work their way around. As Miles mentioned, this is kind of one of the easier schemes to look at and start to think about the phasing of this. So the parking garage can kind of go in first. We can get people used to parking there and then start to build the buildings around it and kind of fill out the site.
Jeremy, is the Elm Street Loop one way?
It's shown as one way in this particular scheme. I think from the parking garage entry to the left, we could potentially look at that as a two-way entry and exit. We're really pinched on this kind of little leg that comes up. We can't get a two-way entry and exit out to Elm Street here. So everything kind of to the east of the parking garage would have to be one-way exit only. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Scheme 2 looks at kind of two things. One, when we looked at Scheme 1, while there was an efficiency in both the buildings and the parking garage, we weren't loving the kind of exposure that parking garage had, especially as you're kind of coming down the slope. It also did nothing to address a number of the issues around the train station that we had been hearing about from folks as we were kind of doing our information gathering sessions. So this looks at the same style of parking garage that you saw on Locust Avenue. So it's a flat plate parking garage with speed ramps on it. What we also did was kind of do a hybrid here. So we have a little bit of a parking deck, and you'll see that in the lower level plans. But from that lower level up, it would all be structured parking. What that allows us to do is kind of squish that parking garage against that western side of the site, and then wrap it in residential buildings. So in the 3D, you'll see in a second, kind of both the view from Elm Street, but also the view from Pine Street, you're really just looking at residential building. The other thing that allowed us to do is take a lot of the residential and push it to the west and start to create a plaza that we can celebrate a little more on our way to the train station. So you see that pedestrian experience as you kind of leave the corner. This would be sloped down to get you from that upper level to the lower level. And you can transverse that coming out of both the residential buildings, but also the parking garage. The other thing we did was look at, is there a way to now kind of take control of that train station parking? And we heard a lot about how the current exit of that train station parking kind of dumps you into that really awkward intersection. People end up going the wrong way down the one-way road. And so can we build enough parking on the lumberyard site to kind of reconfigure what's happening at the train station and give the town an opportunity to have, a park space or something more than just parking as you go to that intersection there. So it's reduced. I think it's down about 50 spaces from what is here, because this is all built out in parking now. And those are absorbed into the parking structure and the kind of, and you'll see in a second here, the parking that's under this deck here. Because there's a little more squeeze on the buildings here, this is one way in and around. It does become kind of two-way for people to get in and out, but the flow would primarily be into the site from Elm Street and through. We are still going to leverage that Grove Street entry, and you can see there's kind of a small driveway. So we, again, want two entries and exits, two entry points into that garage and the exit out onto Grove Street. And so I think, this image, the southwest image, really tells the tale of the difference between these two schemes. The view from the southern side of the site is really mostly building massing. You're still going to get that one-story parking deck that's underneath here, you will see, but again, that's down at the level of the railroad tracks. The majority of that view up is going to be that four-story building that's sitting on top of that. You can also see this has kind of this gentle slope, so it goes from a story up down to zero as we get towards the train station, giving us some really nice opportunities, both from a vehicle and a pedestrian standpoint, to get into that train station drop off, the parking, and then get everybody on and off of the train. And then these are how the plans break down. So again, this is that structured parking up above the deck. You can see kind of a very simple rectangle that includes the ramp and then the two-way parking. And then as we get kind of down below that, we are going to leverage the rest of the site. And again, we do have at least a story drop from Elm Street down to the railroad track. So the cutting and filling is a minimal here. And we're just trying to kind of maximize the lower level of the site from a parking standpoint, so we don't have to put in that giant structured parking that you saw in the first scheme. So in each of these, scheme 1 is 156 units, scheme 2 is 163. Again, at this scale, I think if we really needed to head in one direction or the other, I think there's some flexibility in there. Again, we kept it at 4 stories in each. The difference is there's more parking in scheme 2 because we started to absorb some of that train station site parking that we took away. Whereas in scheme 1, we just kind of left it there and didn't interface with it. You can see the breakdown of the different buildings here. I have a typo, so let me go back to that summary screen there. I'll get the real numbers, but the total unit count is correct. These building numbers are not, so I'll go look those up. But yes, that is that's the summary on the lumberyard site.
So in theory, one of those buildings would solve the.
Right, you could get a moratorium basically with probably
building
one.
And the other two, in theory, could be senior, middle.
Market rate, yeah.
Or it
something.
could be market rate
Or
if you
market
wanted to
rate.
do more of a mixed
Yeah.
use project. I mean, I think the feasibility of this is a really nice option that you're not gonna have at the other 2 sites. And also building the garage first allows you to continue to park commuters while you've got other things being constructed, which is not an option we have at Locust.
I like the idea of being able to offer the town a solution to the
The intersection. in Elm.
intersection, which is a nightmare.
Yeah, it's hard to do though, because it's all state.
Right.
Well, so I think
Oh.
that's one of the choke points here is that trains, not the lumberyard lot, but the one next door that's at the actual train station is a
Is
state-owned
state-owned.
lot. I don't know how much they would
Difficult,
argue
obviously.
about, a better redesign of that lot, but.
Wait, that's a state? I thought the one behind it across the
One
walk, both
immediately-
of those.
One immediately up against Elm Street is state.
Oh, I didn't know that. I
And
thought
the
only
one on the
in
other
back. Yeah,
There's 2.
The one in the back is definitely state.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. We look at these schemes and I kind of like the last one for the reasons you said, but how do we scope the cost of any of this? Does that enter into, because I mean, I just have no idea per unit, what we're spending versus doing something smaller or,
So I'm gonna turn that over to Miles. I mean, there is something in our contract about sort of order
Yeah.
of magnitude cost. I don't remember if that was only for the preferred option that we go to.
I don't remember either. If it was for the preferred, I'll look back, but I mean,
Yeah.
I do, my sense, again, on here, I think scheme 1, like if it was a developer, they'd pick scheme 1. I mean, I do think for those, like, it would be simple to build that parking garage in that spot first, right? And possibly still use the parking lot a little bit while you're doing that, and then build the residential after. Scheme 2, with its hybrid nature of the parking tucked under, you really have to, build all that and then waterproof that road that comes through. It's a very nice scheme. In fact, you can't see the parking garage almost from anywhere. And it really wraps it, but I think I'm going to say that scheme is going to be a decent amount more than scheme 1. But
I think there's another issue, which is the hike from the far end of that parking garage to the train station is quite a hike as compared with the other one, which,
that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, it's no further than the furthest spots in the existing lot now, but
Yeah.
I can say for my own husband who competes to get there at 6:10 in the morning, the ones closest to the station are the
wants to
ideal
go
ones.
first.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's where he parks.
So if you go to scheme 2 lower level, there are some parking spaces close to the right. There's some. It's kind of the same layout as what's there today, I guess, right, Jeremy? And so, and
It's
more or less, like,
yeah, it's close. Yep.
yeah, yeah. It's not the same, but it's just parking is dispersed in a sort of same general
But the
areas.
upside, Jeff, is that you'd be covered for some of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're not, as of today, if you're parking at the far end of that
And
lot, you're
I
walking.
agree, I agree with Miles. I really like the fact that you're wrapping
Yeah,
the exposed part with housing.
yeah.
And-
Well, and I think that scheme one, as simple as it is, and it's probably cost effective as it is, the view of that garage from Pine Street
Getting a lot of-
is not gonna be great. I mean,
Mhm.
that will loom over Pine Street, and those are pretty narrow lots, so it's not like you're really gonna get redevelopment along that edge of Pine Street that would ever shield the view of that garage. So that's one of the big challenges I see with that one.
I agree with you.
Go ahead, Bill.
I guess I was sort of expecting to see some, on this particular site, I don't know, something more elegant. I'm not quite sure, just sort of, and I'm not saying I don't like it, I'm just saying I thought the lumberyard could produce more for us. And then it seemed like a big cost option to me. That was one of the questions I was gonna raise. But the other one, given the number of units that we have, which I guess is what, total units, the parking ratio of, 1.2 at the train station just seems to me that sort of not enough, right? Because even at 1.1 or 1.2, 1.3 is probably just marginal. There's gonna be a lot of competition for,
Well, so that's the parking ratio for the residential.
that's just the residential?
And I would argue that at a train station, you may be able to get away with less because if someone's choosing to live at a train station, it's possible they're taking the
Could be.
train.
Could be.
I mean.
I guess I missed that. That's just the residential.
Just the
I think
residential.
they're arguing for less parking, getting it on this side.
So what you've done is you've deducted the existing parking and just sort of said we're getting 1.3, 1.2 spots for every residential unit?
Yeah.
Yeah, in all of the schemes, we backed out the existing parking and then gave you the parking ratio for just the residential portion of the parking.
It's a good
And
point.
the
I wonder if we
The
do
question
consider
about
modifying
commercial-
the scheme. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wonder if we do consider on this particular site, using a lower parking ratio because it's really TOD parking, do we go down to 0.75 unit, spaces per unit for the, Krista, I don't know, what do you think about that?
I mean, I'd really defer to the housing authority, what they thought was marketable, but I mean, from a planning perspective, yes.
Yeah.
That would be my answer, but
Right.
I guess it
Yeah.
really
I think
comes
there's
down
a
to.
strong argument on this site to diminish the
Right.
parking requirements.
That's,
And not only that, I mean, you're really close to the magic circle,
Right.
right on the other side with on retail, there's zero parking requirement.
Right.
On the commercial and retail.
yeah.
I think you will get a ton of pushback from residents and elected officials if it's not
At least
a
one.
one-to-one
Yeah.
ratio for residential. I think
Mm.
parking is a really,
Mhm.
really sensitive issue, particularly when it comes to multifamily housing. And so I wouldn't go below one per unit. I
Mhm.
just,
Yeah.
even though it's TOD and you can make that argument, it's a really
Yeah.
tough sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it might end up shaking out that you don't use all of them. And then there's more that you can, right now, anybody can come and park at the lumberyard after 10 a.m. So even if you don't have a permit, if you want to come and shop in town, you can go park there. So I think there are some people who are getting used to that and are utilizing that. So I would be concerned about going below.
Yeah.
I think it's always better to have open spaces than not enough.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you would have it here, particularly if there's commercial, which I think was your
Right.
next question, right,
My
Bill?
next question, when you say commercial, what actually are you talking about there? A coffee shop or you're talking about,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
something small retail. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like was there some spaces that some of the existing tenants in those buildings that face Elm Street could use, but yeah, mostly small retail, something.
But
You can't have
again,
3 coffee shops though, so.
one of the buildings solves our problem. I mean, 4 years. And 4 years later, we have another problem, but you could, instead of building that much residential,
Right.
you
You
could do
could
more
swap it out.
retail,
Yeah, I mean,
nonprofit, whatever you think.
one of the small buildings could have like a nursery school or a
Yeah,
daycare in
exactly.
the
It
first,
could.
and then it could be something else, or this does give us a lot of flexibility to not only meet that moratorium, the 2032, but also mix it up a little bit with the 3 different buildings, because we could phase it in and see what our needs are in 4 years.
Mhm.
I feel like it
Yeah,
gives,
the truth of the matter with this site is there probably are a lot of different ways to design it. You know, there is a little bit more flexibility. We've presented with you too. And I guess my point in saying that is I wouldn't want to get too hung up on, you're nitpicking the design throughout this process. I don't know, people are gonna want to do that, but I think maybe the point here is there's a few different ways to accomplish it. I wish on scheme 2 we could get all of the parking in that vertical garage, and almost make it just a different variant of scheme 1, Jeremy. And I don't know, maybe if we reduce the parking to 1-to-1 and we look at a couple, do we go taller with the parking garage actually? Because you can't see it, because it's surrounded by smaller buildings. I wonder if we want to think about that.
It would definitely need a reduction in parking count
Yeah.
to get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, like, as with all the sites, right? They're fully parked now. So to get to 163 units at 1.2, it's a lot of extra parking spaces. So those parking structures they're big, and they're big geometries to try and toss on this site, even though it is a big site. I think without the reduction, it's going to be a little hard to push and pull a whole lot.
So how do we square our expected need for parking at any site that we have with other information the town might have, for example, a school system, think about building another school, more people coming in, presumably that's to take care of families where they have cars and they commute and so on. How do we get other information to make sure that the 1.2 is right or 1.3 is right?
Well, again, I think you've got to remember that this is early days and these are preliminary drawings and there's a decision maker beyond us.
Yeah.
So I think we're saying this is what could work for the goal of affordable housing. Now, when it goes to the decision makers, are there other goals they're trying to meet? Are there other infrastructure concerns that they're trying to mitigate? Yes.
But what I'm really getting at though is if we went to 1.4, let's say, on any of these sites, would that change our answer on this site?
In terms of
Might
what
we
it looks
need,
like.
might we need to better understand what our parking needs are here? And maybe we have enough right now,
Mhm.
but just anticipating if we were to do a public hearing, what people might say, well, the school board is saying we need this, and this group is saying we need that. And I just want to have an
Which
answer.
is why
for
I
it.
think that's great information for us to pass along with our recommendation. If this turned out to be our recommendation, we would say, we heard that there's an additional need for parking for the Board of Education building, whatever we hear, so that the elected officials
So we should
have.
ask for that. We should at least try to
Well,
solicit
I think
existing
people will give it to
information.
you. I mean, I think
Okay.
the second you throw this out, if somebody had some other need or use for this site, they're going to start talking about it.
Yeah. And I think, again, what's nice about this site is that with the 3 buildings, say there's a boom and you need more housing, more parking, maybe building 3 instead of, because we wouldn't necessarily, maybe in 4 years, we'd need 48 more units, but maybe that becomes a parking lot.
Flexibility.
Yeah, there's some flexibility, particularly if this can be phased in, or we decide we don't want to put more housing there. We need just a flat parking lot. And then we look over at Richmond Hill and say, maybe then we can build a small building there to satisfy what we need in 4 years, starting with something like this with a gives us that kind of flexibility, I think, where we can pivot and say, okay, we've got this for 2032, for 2036, what do we need? How has the law changed? How do we need another building? And then I think it's easier to digest that way, I think, as a town. And maybe it's commercial space, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's more parking, maybe it's, who knows, an AI data center. I don't, hopefully not, but I don't know. 2032.
A small nuclear power plant.
A bunker. I don't know.
As we were going on.
Well, I remember when Jeff Speck came and spoke at the library and he was talking about this lot and he said, you don't need to provide parking there. For the commuters, yes, but for the residents, no, because people are living right there on the train. And I agree with you 100%, Hillary. That's not understanding how people go out to dinner in this town, where their friends are and so on. It's just not. But it does sound to me as if we might need, is there like a parking god who could come and talk with us and tell us, what's on the horizon? What are we seeing being built? Where are the needs? Where is there less use than there used to be? Is there any way we could learn more?
You mean in terms of how much parking we need to provide on a site?
Well, and also to explain, how do we come up with 1.2 versus in this lot 1.0 versus 1.4 somewhere else, we only know what we know and a hell of a lot, but is there anybody who is looking ahead and knows what's coming and could educate us more
when you
about
talk to the TOD gurus, it's below the 1 to 1.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I hear
I'd say
what you're
0.5, 0.75, 0.5 or something like that, but
Yeah.
right.
saying.
Market.
In real life, I think Hillary's right. I mean, I just know how people live. We're still, I think, connected to the automobile. But I mean, this is the purest TOD there is.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you look at it from the parking gurus on that, then it's really
will
more than that.
0.6 or something.
Right.
I think that's though like somewhat aspirational. And I say that as somebody who loves to walk. I miss living in the city because I would walk everywhere. And now I drive everywhere. And it's just that mentality that
But I think it also is easy for people in that sphere to not necessarily differentiate between a New Canaan train station and a Grand Central. Like, do you need parking at Grand Central? Probably not, because everyone's going to walk and take the subway. In New Canaan, you get off the train here.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to downtown or you live literally at the train station, you're going to need a car.
And what we're seeing in Stanford now is the reverse commute.
Yeah.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of people, young people living in Stanford and flying into the city to work.
I remember, I'm forgetting who told us this. It might have been Tom O'Day, who said when a lumberyard proposal came up several years ago, it was below one parking space per unit, and it was like the third rail. And I don't want to get into that.
Right.
People love their cars. I mean,
Yeah.
I think people like to have a car up here. I think they don't want to be. New Canaan's a great town, but there's other towns that people want to go to and explore, and you go apple picking and it snows and you need you want to go to your friend's house that lives further out.
I think you're 100% right. But I just think that if we're going to recommend something based on that, if there was something out there we can look at, I mean, you have autonomous driving coming up, you have, technology driven cars. And there's a whole bunch of things which might drive this in each direction. There
And I
must
think
be a
that the
report that
numbers that
exists
they're
out there.
Giving us is a very conservative number. I think a 1.2 parking ratio at this site is a conservative number, which means
Conservative which way?
So too.
in the
Yeah.
sense that you are going to have potentially more parking than you need. If anything, you're going to need possibly less. I don't think you're going to
Right.
need more. I mean, we could always use more, right? But I'm just saying, from a building perspective, nobody would build, no developer, no private developer would come in and build more than 1.2. They'd probably try and build a heck of a lot less, to Mike Sweeney's point. They'd come in and tell us,
Yeah.
this is a
1
TOD
point.
site, we want to build 0.75. You should approve it because we're by a train station.
I kind of have a sense of what Bill's saying.
Yeah.
That, I agree with your point of view. My concern is that we end up building too much. And that we embed the cost of too much into the housing units, because that's what we'll be doing.
I do think that people will like covered parking. commuters. And so existing people who park there, I think will like, and there's a potential revenue stream that you could increase the cost of parking because it's going to be covered now, which I think is really appealing to a lot of people. But yeah, I think the parking, I just don't know where it's going to go.
Well, no,
Right?
but I also just don't feel like we have to necessarily
No.
figure that out. I think that answer comes in time.
I do
Later.
think, I agree.
Yeah.
It will come out as you go through the process. Being conservative now is good. Being a little bit on the higher side, I think it's good.
I have a little bit, I look at it a little differently. I think that when we have a recommendation, there should be 5 or 6, 10 reasons why we recommend it to site.
Yeah.
And I think the flexibility, covered parking, I think not overbuilding, not underbuilding. I'm not sure whether the number is 1.2 or 0.6. You know,
I
just
know.
think, but we ought to look at that. And if it was 0.6, we would have even another reason on all this, you know, and so I'm not suggesting that we look at it to stop the project,
Yeah.
but just to try to come up with supporting reasons why this is a good site.
And my concern comes through the 26th or the mid-February meetings. There's going to be points of vulnerability in building support or at least tolerance for a big,
So the challenge that we have before us, and I assume Miles can probably speak to this too, is that what we're providing is very conceptual and very early days. We're just trying to get a feel of what could be put on these sites and how many units they would generate and what a possible layout would be. And people are going to look at these pictures and say, that's what they're building. It's going to be this tall. It's going to have extra parking, or it's not going to have enough parking. And they're going to jump to conclusions as if this is written in stone and it's fact.
that's
And
my
it's,
concern.
but there's no way around that. We have to start the process and move beyond it. And if every time we did a conceptual plan, I mean, we will get pushback, but if we let that stop us, nothing ever gets built. So we have to
Krista,
figure out how
I
to
agree
move
with you. The
through
point
the
you're making.
process and just explain the uncertainties and the unknowns, which are many.
Yeah.
I think on the question of parking, we should know as much as we can about what the attitudes towards this would be, both generally and whoever in town has thought about parking and the evolution of parking in the town. I just really think that, I think Hillary said it, it's kind of like people are going to jump to a conclusion that you got to have a parking space plus for everybody who could possibly want to park there. And I think there's some prospect that we would conclude after really looking at it and you know, when we're well down the design, in the design phase and everything, that we don't have to have one parking space per.
I mean, it's almost like a sociological view on who is going to be inhabiting these units. I mean, if this is going to be, I'm sorry.
No.
If there's going to be on a train line with people heading into the city, you know, in Stanford or Greenwich, maybe before COVID, when everyone was hopping on the train in the morning, then I think we depressed the parking count quite a bit. Or if we're at a suburb right outside of Boston where everyone's, you know, taking the train or you know, the red line into town, then I think it's depressed a lot. But just anecdotally, when I see the people living in housing authority units, it's families, it's single parents, it's people working locally. Maybe we should look into that, but it's just people who are around here who probably are more dependent on cars. That's anecdotal on my part. But there are countervailing themes here because to my view, this is the quintessential TOD development where you depress parking, but we're in New Canaan. So I don't think those are the people who are living there.
I think the biggest thing is the flexibility. I mean, if you look at the town, you realize it's not our, not our job, but Board of Finance, we are the highest debt per capita in the state. So to build all these buildings, it's, if we can start with one and have plans to do 2 or 3 later on, have to look at the construction costs and so on. I think it's a great selling point, the flexibility we have. Just build one.
Yeah. You could think of the sites. I think if you think of the sites in terms of their maximum yield, like you don't have to build 160 units of housing on this site if you determine, but you can get, you can solve the moratorium on this site ×2, right? Or times one, depending on how things shake out with cost and parking ratios and all that stuff. We know that Locust Street, we're pretty much, we could just get it to fit. I mean, with a little bit of room, but if your parking ratios change, that one's a little more iffy, right? We know Richmond Hill, we can't do it. So
Right.
I wonder if it makes sense to put more like ranges on these schemes as opposed to saying, this is 163 units with 631 parking spaces. It's either 163 units, 163 with 631, or it's 100 units with a little bit more parking. I'm trying to.
For the lumber
too locked
yard,
in.
I think that's a very important question. And one of the things I really like about the flexibility is it will address the question that people will have, and I've even had in my own mind. That is the piece of land we have.
Right.
We all talk about it could be used for a million different things. Having this flexibility means we can use it for whatever the biggest needs are over the next X period of time. And I like that idea very much because it allows, I think gives people the peace of mind. We're not taking the biggest asset we have in terms of town land and
I think you're spot on.
overbuilding.
Viscerally,
one
when I
thing.
was looking, sorry, Jen.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Viscerally, I was kind of against the site from the get-go, without having thought it through. And it was just the visceral reaction of, this is the town's gem, and everything we're doing is political, right? This is political on steroids. Every stakeholder in town is going to be looking at, Locust or at Richmond Hill. It's going to be understandable. This will be times 100. And what could be done there? You could do something magnificent there. I don't know if we want to do what's going on in Darien now, but you could do something, wild there with all kinds of mixed uses. Where the town decides to, pony up with a developer. But as I'm thinking about it more with this phasing, if you, kind of dense pack the parking over toward Grove Street and wrap something around it, of course, you're doing all the parking at once, but, and had that facade looking toward the train station and then just left it open, to our political leaders on the rest down the road. It's kind of, it's enticing
I
now.
think that's really enticing.
And I think, I will say too, given everything that is going on in Hartford, and it's something that, it's to call it, to be able to, and not necessarily call it this now, but to be able to point to it and say, look, we're doing transit-oriented development here. We are doing what you want. I think we don't do enough in New Canaan about telegraphing to Hartford how good of a job we've done. We've done actually a lot of really good things towards affordable housing, transit, and we need to toot our own horn a little bit there. And this is a great opportunity to do so and build something really nice. And again, what if we subdivided half of it and said, somebody build market rate, somebody build some great market rate here. That's a possibility. There's so much here. It's such a target rich environment. Some things I would want to know. I mean, I would love if we could get demographic information from the Housing Authority of what the demand is. Like, where's the longest wait list? Is it for family, like 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms?
It's 2 and 3,
2 and
and there's
3.
a very little demand for 1 bedroom.
Okay.
There was something
Yeah.
in the HUD requirements where we had to do it or under financing, which
Yes.
it's a killer. I think we finally got the last 1 bedroom leased in Millport, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
For the first time, it was not released. It was the initial lease. Wow.
Interesting.
That's a long time.
Mike, do you think that
Yeah.
this location would change the demographic demand? Would you see more perhaps young professionals that aren't making over 80%, but like the idea of living in town and maybe going into Stanford for dinner and drinks?
Market rate housing.
Well, I'm saying-
but not for our affordable housing. I don't think they'd be.
Well, I don't know if they would
Well-
qualify. It depends on what their jobs are. I can tell you, I would have qualified for our affordable housing when I was straight out of
I'm
college.
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's nothing I can do about
Teachers,
that.
early level teachers, a lot of people would.
You have to be careful with that, because involved in some observing some foundation, which is funded by a lot of wealthy people. And then some of the wealthy families that kid getting out of college and applies for a grant. And they
Yeah.
get it, it's sort of, so
Yeah.
the demographics of how that works, that's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's working families and a
Yeah.
lot of people don't qualify. A lot of people, as they move up, then sadly, they
Has
can't
to move
qualify
out.
the
Phase
next
out.
year. I remember when Avalon first came on, I think the settlement agreement provided that X number of units were going to be set to the side
20.
for police and fire, and my recollection is they were not occupied.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It went for
And-
naught, yeah.
But I would like to see if our demand is for families, like Lumberyard would probably be West School. Locust or Richmond Hill. I'm not sure about Richmond Hill, if it would be south or west. Locust, I think, would be south. Because I think Heritage Hill goes to south.
Okay.
And Forest Street goes to south. So that's an interesting number too, to consider if you have 70 apartments or 70 units at Locust, let's assume they're all families with one child.
Well, it'd also be interesting when you have to expand the school.
Well, that's conversations happening absent us.
Yeah,
So if we build a
that's
fourth
law.
school, then we don't have to worry about it because it's all gonna get redistricted. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a data point, and I think the more that we have, the better. I think, I will say that I think one of the major pushbacks from the lumberyard, even though I think it's terrific, is that right up the street on Weed Street, there's probably going to be a multifamily development there, with only a handful of affordable units, but that does increase traffic
Yeah.
flow at that intersect, in that general area. So I think there will be some pushback on that, but look, right now, it's in the center of town, it's in a great spot, and it's a parking lot. And that is not its highest and best use, and I think that a plan like this does give us flexibility to figure that out as we go, what the highest and best use is of this.
All right, so guys, it's 8 o'clock. I just want to do a little check-in about where we're at, because we've been here now for 2 hours, which is fine. I mean, we stay here as long as we want tonight, but are there specific things, well, number one, do we still have unanswered questions based on what
For
Miles and Jeremy? Because if so, let's do that. And then the next thing I was gonna say is if there's information that we feel we need or want from Miles and Jeremy or not from Miles and Jeremy, let's have that conversation. So can we focus on those two things for the next couple of minutes?
If you were to do scheme 2 of lumberyard, in what order would we do the parking garage and the residential that sort of encumbers it or envelops it, and then leave the other 2 building as phase 2 and 3? Is that right?
I think so. I mean, I was flip-flopping on that a little bit, and actually earlier thinking we would just build the parking garage and parking and leave the wrapper off of it and build the other building across the street is sort of a freestanding, like that's your affordable housing building, and leave the rest. But I have to think about it a little bit more. We're just like getting the schemes down. Jeremy, do you know how many units we could fit in the detached piece? I know you got the typo there, but
Let me go grab that.
okay, all right. Well, while you're doing that,
Sorry, I jumped in if anybody has any more questions.
okay.
Other
I
things?
guess 2 questions. I know we dismissed the parking garage looking over Pine, as it wouldn't look that, but the parking garage down in Stamford, actually, I thought looked pretty good, given the fact that parking, should we see a schematic on that? Could we see something that was a little more visual to help those of us who haven't studied this feel like that's the right answer? Is there something you could give us?
We could give you some images of some nice parking garages, I think.
Well, I mean, what you would build there, what it might look like from.
Yeah, I think that would take a bit of, I mean, we kind of jumped the gun with the 3D on this one. I would recommend trying to find an image of a nice parking garage, honestly, that we think would fit in contextually here. Because we could do a lot with that,
That's something you could do?
Well, so they have a scope of work and that's beyond
That's beyond, I got
the
the,
contract.
Yeah. But I do think I could find an image of a nice parking garage. If
You must have
want
you must have a nice parking garage in your file, right?
Yeah, or something that would fit here. Wouldn't necessarily say would be one of ours, but Krista, we could talk about that offline and figure out. That.
Yeah.
I mean, I worry less about that loom. I often wonder about somebody wanting to rent an apartment that is directly next to the train line.
Yeah.
And so like in my head at first, I was like, oh, that's perfect because then you put the parking right there to absorb a lot of train noise.
Yeah.
And like my kid's orthodontist is in one of those buildings on Pine that looks out the back, and it's not a great view right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think a parking garage would necessarily make it better or worse. I think it would kind of be a wash of aesthetic. Like, and people park back there. There's parking for the people who use those buildings, but most of the offices look onto, what street is that? Pine.
Yeah.
They don't, that's a
back up to
hallway.
it.
Like
Yeah.
that's a hallway to get to the offices. So there's not a lot of windows that somebody would have to stare at a parking garage all day is what I'm saying.
I mean,
It's like,
this again is beyond the scope of work,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder what from Richmond Hill, like somewhere even lower, like down at Mead Park
Oh,
at
yeah.
the pond looking up. Like that's what
Well,
you
if we're
would
going
see.
to I mean, if we're going to recommend this, I mean, we probably at some point someone's gonna ask that, right? They're gonna see
Well,
these slides and we should really get it answered.
Well, so once we discuss and get public input, we're going to narrow this down to a preferred option and there'll be, some more detail provided on those. But again, this is all very conceptual framework. Once the town chooses an option, then you can get really into like, what does this look like from all these different angles and how do we screen it?
What will we be recommending? The garage at place A or place B, or we just say?
Well, we don't know yet. I mean, we will eventually know. And I mean, I don't even know if we're recommending a specific scheme or if we're just recommending a site because the options that we saw for that site, we thought were.
Actually, looking back at the ordinance, it looks like they want us to take it beyond just a site, just recommend a site. They want us to,
Our original ordinance?
our original ordinance.
So what are you thinking?
I think at least something like this,
Okay.
at least something like this.
So you mean choose a specific, not just the site, but get narrowed down to a
A
scheme?
scheme on it.
Okay.
Or if we can't decide between two schemes.
Well, I think you're gonna get much less pushback on this than either of the first two, or the impact of the neighborhood. I
Agreed.
mean, it's just, people may not want to give up this gem. But if they're convinced they have to do something, there's gonna be very, fewer people complaining that this is being put in my backyard. So I think that's an advantage. I think the flexibility of staging it is wonderful. Maybe 3 years from now, the law changes.
Mhm.
And, we haven't built 162 units or whatever, and we're gonna make stores there. So I think you could take the site and then provide options on its development to be consistent with
Mhm.
that plan and say, we think this is clearly the best site. And here's 2 or 3, schemes that would develop it for however many units you want, how many affordable, whatever else. And I think we could.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna get to
A preferred option.
Locust, maybe scheme 1, 2, or town parking lot, scheme 1 or 2. So.
Yeah. We're supposed to, I mean, they're on contract once we get to a preferred option, like I said, doing a little more design so that we have a little more to give the elected officials when we make a recommendation.
and I think that in the scope of our committee, our whole commission, or just this subcommittee, having a public hearing, you will have elected officials come to that and voice their opinion. So we will get a read. If we decided to do this February 9th, it's not just a read from the public. I'm quite certain you would get a read from people who are appointed to commissions or elected. If we discuss this,
Yeah.
I also want to know how much this stuff is going to cost and like how we finance it. That's a whole other subcommittee that has to like figure out how we pay
Well,
for it.
that's it. I mean, we do just one phase on the
Yeah.
lumberyard site, but we build a whole parking garage. That's putting that whole parking garage into fewer number of units and exponentially, well,
Right.
increases the cost per unit.
Right.
Might be smart to do, I don't know. But
Mhm.
I want to be able to let Miles and Jeremy go. They've given us so much of their time tonight.
It's okay, you know, I mean, I appreciate that, but you know, we want want to help you guys close out the meeting, but go ahead.
How are we gonna handle costs?
So I believe, I don't have the contract in front of me. Miles can correct me if I'm wrong, but so once we get to a preferred alternative, a preferred scenario, you know, whether it's any of these sites with option A or B or option C, D, E that we haven't decided on yet. So what they will ultimately give us is a little bit more design for what that could look like with what we call order of magnitude costs. So just big numbers.
So we won't have the costs in time to have it reflected in our recommendation.
Yeah, we'll have it for the recommendation. We won't have it
But
before
not for the
public
town.
meeting.
Before the recommendation, this was the
To
decision.
inform our decision
Yeah,
about
inform
what we
our
recommend.
decision. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
Krista, I was
don't-
just looking at
Go ahead.
the scope. So what we actually said we would do is that we would provide two options per site, two dimensionally, and then when we decide on a preferred option for each site, we would mask them three dimensionally. We just went ahead and did the 3D for all because we realized it was going to be impossible to describe to you all how the sites work. I do think that it would be helpful to try to the next step to be to get to a preferred option per site before we show it to the public and go further. You could disagree with that. My thought is that it may be confusing for the public enough to see three sites with two options per site, but
I think that's right.
I
I
agree.
think
Okay.
you're just gonna get,
yeah,
how do you even weigh the?
right.
So I think another natural question is, do we want to show Richmond Hill? Do we want to include Richmond Hill? Because it's
Right.
so different. It's so different from the
Yeah.
other two.
To me, it's like an add-on. It's like an à la carte menu. Like you have to do Locust or Lumberyard. And then if you also want a, a little cherry on top, go over to Richmond Hill. But Richmond Hill in and of itself is not.
Compelling.
Well,
Although I see what
I
you're
will
saying,
say that
I'm sorry.
the evolution of my thinking might be the way other people will think too, which was it was useful to see in some ways the futility of that.
Right.
I mean, in good faith, we put that on the list.
Right.
And now it looks illogical, but to show three, I don't know, we could talk
Well,
about this
and-
later, but I almost think it's smart to include it
Well,
because you learn a lot.
I think that is a fair point. And I mean, one of the things I was asked multiple times as I went to get the contract for Amenta Emma approved is why didn't we do more sport? Why didn't we do more sport? And I said, well, that was on the list, but it's very small and it's in the center of town and it'd be a huge disruption and you're not going to get that many units for the cost of what, basically the same arguments you can make on Richmond Hill. So I do think to your point, for the sake of showing people that we looked at different things and here's why right now for our needs of more sport or Richmond Hill or something of probably a sub 1 acre scale is probably not going to help meet our needs.
Well, the interesting thing is too, if we did something like the lumberyard as proposed, as sort of schematically proposed here, and we find that we have too many parking spaces, it opens up a lot of possibilities for something like Richmond Hill, where
Right.
maybe we don't need as many parking spaces because it's right there.
Right.
And so that could be something for the next year, particularly if we have more units at lumberyard than we need to get a moratorium. So we need to sort of backfill. And if we find that we have 100 extra parking spaces or even 25, that ups the scale of Richmond Hill of what we can do.
Right.
Less parking, more units, still close to town.
So I'm
Or if
wondering.
we can use the ones near near Walgreens.
Yeah.
Under Walgreens.
So I'm wondering if, in my mind, Richmond Hill becomes more of sort of that background contextual information that we give people how we got here. And, we went through this whole process. We looked at all the lots in town. We narrowed it down to these lots. And then, we even did some more study on
Yeah.
Richmond Hill. And here's why we're not continuing with that one right now, but just kind of bring people mentally through the process. And Richmond Hill, I think is an important data point in that process.
Completely agree.
That's how I would handle it.
Refresh me on this, though. I seem to recall when Glenn Chalder spoke with us, when he was talking about, he had done something upstate somewhere. I forget what town it was in. And they found maybe 2 sites in town. And then within each of the sites, I think they had plan A and B. So it wasn't a la carte, but it did have people go through a thought process. And yeah, I like this part of town better than where I live, or I like this part of town better, it makes some sense. And then they also had to check a box on scheme A or B. I think that could be a good thing, but I'm not wedded to it.
So that's how I had originally conceived the survey, was that, here's let's exclude Richmond here. Here's Locust, here's option A. What do you like? It's not quite that simple, but on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate this one? Blah, blah, blah. And then here's option B, and then comparing option A to option B, which one do you like better? And then doing the same on Lumberyard, and then ultimately saying, okay, now that you've seen all of them, do you like Lumberyard's options better or Locust options better, and starting to kind of bring them through that deductive reasoning process to get to what they think their outcome is, and then have them enumerate reasons why, like traffic concerns, length of time, phasing, whatever the issues are that weighed into their decision-making process. I mean, it's not easy to develop a survey like that, but can be done. And I think that's where I was headed. But I'm open to what Miles suggested, which is us selecting a preferred option. I mean, I could go either way.
For each location.
For each location. I just don't want the public, and I think this might be your concern too, Mike, based on what you said earlier, to feel like we've gone too far down the road without looping them in. So I don't know, we don't want to bring them in too soon, because then there's too many options and, we can't really make a decision and blah, blah, blah. But if we bring them in too late and we say, well, we've narrowed it down to these 2 options, people might be like, well, what happened to?
I'm just thinking of optics. Even if we got to there in complete good faith, I just know how people are sometimes saying, well, wait, this is already cooked. It's been presented as a fait accompli,
Well, and I also think seeing the 2 options side by side for each site helps people understand that this is all conceptual. Whereas if you just show them 1 option for each site, they might think, like you're saying, this is a fait accompli, as opposed to, oh, they're still, spitballing over here. And one place they put the garage here and one place they put the garage there. I think that shows you kind of where we are in the process, and that this is all just conceptual. That would, I guess, be the argument towards showing both options on the survey.
Can I ask a kind of a dumb question? I'm not an architect. I'm not in land. I have no concept of how much this stuff costs. So is it more expensive to build 2 smaller buildings with adequate parking, like astronomically more expensive, or 1 big, would it be more expensive to do something smaller on Locust Avenue, the Richmond Hill, one of the proposals, so that we have 2 small buildings with parking versus Lumberyard? Because that might be digestible to people too. And I'm just throwing that out as an option, because I think over on Richmond, I think some people, it would be nice if they might think, oh, we're spreading it out a little bit. It's in 2 different parts of town. It's not this huge project that we have to bite off. Even the big parking garage and the big building at Lumberyard, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's going to be building over there. Let's assume that there's going to be building at Weed at the same time, probably along the same lines. Is it crazy expensive, more expensive to build 2 smaller buildings than 1 large?
I'm not a builder, but I would say to the extent you have to build a garage or standalone garage, that is very, very expensive.
Okay.
And the maintenance cost for that, to me, is enormous now.
Okay.
I've seen enough to believe that, but I don't have the expertise these guys have, for sure.
Miles, what do you think? I guess I would say the mobilization cost of building on 2 sites is going to make it more expensive than you want it to be.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you want to concentrate one site if you can, for sure.
I'd ask.
No, I think
you're envisioning like 60 at Locust and 20 at
Yeah.
Richmond
that's
Hill.
nice.
Yeah, something
So
along those
nothing
lines,
looks
like,
enormous.
so it's not, just trying to mitigate the traffic issues at Locust and think about that, and maybe do something on a little bit of a smaller scale. there and at Richmond Hill simultaneously, so that you have sort of two smaller ball things that aren't maximizing the density there necessarily, but they're elegant and nice solutions. But if you're like, no, that costs twice as much as what we would build at Lumberyard, then it's a non-starter, right? It's gonna cost $350 million and you can't qualify for any.
We had clients one time who actually faced a parking garage. It was on Lower Trinity Street, like behind the Target building, and the parking garage was built. And then they knew, part of the whole block was going to be built up in the future. They did the structure in a way so it was engineered so that they could kind of like cantilever right into the new parking structure. And the ramps were already thought out ahead of time. So in years down the road, they built the second parking garage, which connected to the first. It's complicated, it's engineering, but you might not even have to build the entire garage at once. For example, if you did the one parking garage at the Lumberyard, maybe you could do a smaller one and then attach onto it later on. I just thought.
I can really see why people wait till later in the process to bring the community in and have conversations, even though that is not the right thing to do. And I don't believe in it in theory, but I understand why, because I was taking notes and I was thinking that I'm going to raise my hand if I'm in that room and ask about parking and ask about the traffic impact and ask about what it looks like from this side and this side and this side and how much does it loom over me if I live on Pine Street or on.
Do you guys think, I mean, so we have these drawings.
Yeah.
Is that more helpful or is that more detrimental to us when people, I mean, would it be better for us to just put out numbers and say, option A on.
I had the exact same thoughts. I remember we talked about this before when Steve Kleppen years ago talked about the Zone D over on Grove Street, where Weed and Dury is.
Yeah.
And the tennis racket club next door, they were doing thoughts to rezone it. And I think what Steve had done, he did a great job. He kind of blocked it out like this with different heights of buildings and that sort of thing. But people reacted really badly to it. I think they looked at these blocks and those and kind of like.
They think it's just going to be a little block, right?
Brutalist,
no windows.
Architecture,
And
there's no elevations, no trees.
I do kind of like the idea of starting with just maximum unit counts for each site or something like that and getting feedback on that.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, although Charlton did it the other way, as I recall, he did have some massing on each site. I don't know, kind of going back and forth.
Okay.
When do you think you making this communication or presentation?
Well, I don't know if we're ready to.
No, that's not getting it. I mean, I think this.
Well, so I mean, there's.
Building the survey, are you concerned about? Because I know the CRC, which is the Charter Revision Committee, they're using a survey tool which I think tries to make sure you're not getting overly influenced. And so I can check that.
Yeah.
But if you pick site A, maybe all the neighbors would, provide input. How do we get input that's not biased? That's what I'm really trying to get at.
Well, you're going to get.
You're going to get
biased
some, but you don't want it
input.
to be piled on.
I mean,
get real good input. That's
and with a survey, you, to a certain extent, collect some basic demographic information. So you know who, or not who, but where generally what type of person is giving you input.
But I agree, we want something that's unbiased to the extent possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the questions that I think we should definitely ask is like, where do you live in town? And give, some generic options. And if everyone responding to the Richmond Hill survey is like, I live basically right in downtown, south of the center, then, you kind of know that you've got a contingent of neighbors that have responded, which isn't bad. I mean, they should respond, but if that's 80% of the responses, then it just kind of tells you where it was coming from. All right, so this is a lot to digest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, one question I have for Miles and Jeremy is, I assume you're going to be sending us the presentation you gave us tonight so that we have more time to digest?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you guys feel like,
Fix the typo, Jeremy.
you guys even feel like we can get to, we may not get to a decision tonight about when to start the public involvement. Do you feel like we can get to some decisions about what the public involvement looks like? And then maybe we need another meeting to come back and really hash out the details of that once we've digested this a little bit more.
Can we try to, should we meet as a subcommittee before our next full
Right, the
Affordable Housing Committee meeting? I think that might be helpful. We can all kind of go and marinate. over
Yeah,
it
Because, I mean,
that'd be very
Review
helpful.
this and then.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be comfortable rolling out any sort of public survey by January 26th. I don't
Yeah.
think that we're there. I'll just say that.
Okay.
I think February is a very good time to do it. I think that, I think surveys, I'm kind of about, because I feel like I don't know who you're getting to respond, and it's a little bit sterile when sometimes things like this, it's helpful to talk to people. It's helpful to have a conversation instead of just like gauging where they are that morning when they decide to take the survey. Maybe they're super activated because there was a court decision in a car case or something, and so they're like, I just don't know where they're coming from. Whereas when you're at a meeting and a public hearing and face to face, you can have that sort of more nuanced conversation about what we're trying to achieve and what our whole goals are and what our point is and how we got to this.
So, I mean, one thought I have as you're saying, because again, I think they kind of meet different audiences, but if we waited until we had our public meeting and had the recording of that public meeting on the front page of the survey, then there's some context right there and everyone's starting with the same baseline information when we ask questions.
I mean,
That'd be
And they may or may not watch it, but.
No, but I think people,
That'd be
once
first.
it gets picked up by any press, like if Mike writes about it, or if the Sentinel covers it, which we can have them do, people will start responding. They'll pick up the phone and call the first selectman. They do it all, people do it all the time, and she'll start to get anecdotal, responses, reactions. We will. And, I find giving more information, because then there can't be that accusation of like hiding the ball and presenting something that appears fully baked. I think, you can kind of lead people to the water, but you can't make them drink. So you do the best you can. And, we just have to prepare for incoming fire.
Well, the other thing we do
is
is we just keep going back out to people
Yeah,
as we learn more.
yeah,
That's the honest thing to do.
yeah.
I like the public hearing and tape it, you produce it,
Yeah.
do a survey, get input, you get a lot of input.
Okay. So if we're gonna take this information, get the PowerPoint from tonight, go home and marinate, probably the earliest I can get back in a room with you guys is the first week in February, which would be the week before our full committee meeting, which is the week of February 2nd. Is that something that can work for the rest of you?
Yeah.
February 6th, is that the one?
Actually, the only night I can't do it that week is Wednesday night.
Wait, this is January 20th, the week of
No,
January.
February
the following
2.
week, February 2.
Oh, got it. Okay. Let me check.
You cannot do Wednesday
I
night.
can't do the February 4th, but I can do,
What time of day are we talking about?
I'm assuming evening, but
Monday or Tuesday?
yeah, Monday
Yeah,
or
I can't do
Tuesday.
Thursday, so Monday or Tuesday would have.
Okay, so the 2nd or 3rd,
I'm coming back from a trip that weekend until Monday, so after the 2nd, I'm good all week.
okay, so the
So
3rd,
the 3rd.
and who wants to name a time? What time?
Third, I have a committee meeting, charter committee at 5. So therefore, either before or after, so either 3 o'clock or.
Probably
7 o'clock.
7. All right, let's say February 3rd at 7. I don't think
Sure.
some of us are leaving work at 3 to come to this. All right, I will try to distill some of the decision points we need to make in that meeting. I have a couple of notes here of
Yeah,
things
I'm happy to work with you on that.
that we talked about, and we were sort of maybe this or maybe that, but I will try for that meeting to have an agenda with some pretty specific decision points of what we need to decide. And does that sound good? We can go
Yeah.
from there. And then we'll have some sort of update to give the full committee on the 9th about how we think we're going to move forward. And obviously we won't have probably moved forward by the time we meet with them on the 9th. So if there's pushback from our full committee or from whoever attends that meeting, we still have time to pivot. Is everyone
Yeah.
comfortable?
I think that's a good plan.
Okay. Miles and Jeremy, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I mean, I think it makes sense to marinate on this a little bit. You know, it's a lot of information, and the way you approach it, I think is important to think through, especially when you start showing things to folks. So
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I think
I
it's
thought
good.
that schemes were really good
Yeah.
and really helpful.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So
Yeah,
thank you so much for the work that you've done
Um,
in a short amount of time.
Sure. No problem. And think about, you don't have to answer now, but if you would want me to attend on the third, or via Zoom or something, I'd be happy to, if you want
Okay.
to give some questions. So I don't want to put you in the spot in case you want to do it without me and just
Talk
but
about you.
talking. Yeah, exactly. Right. But,
Okay, let me just check. Hillary, can you tell, do we have anybody on Zoom for public comment before?
No, they're usually it pops up that
Okay.
there's somebody waiting.
All right, so we're the only 3 people.
But
All
you
right.
guys can text me if somebody's out there. I don't think so. It doesn't look like it.
All right, well, so I don't think we have any public comment because we don't seem to have anybody on Zoom, and I feel like we've handled the next step. So if everyone's good, we'll adjourn for this evening and we'll marinate and reconvene on February 3rd.
Great.
Good to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
good night.
Thank you.
No. All right, I'm going to stop recording.
They're gonna
Thanks,
send
everyone.
it to us.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to stop recording?